Life is concerning a rhino.
A rhino? Blimey.
Right? Yeah,
okay.
rhino. I used to live in Kenya when I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
And we were in this wildlife park in a grey Morris Minor. This rhino started chasing us. There's me and my sister in the back seat.
Right.
It was like something out of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
We were turning around saying, "Believe it, Dad. Just put your foot down, Dad. We're in a field."
When the bird leaned into his car and went oi oi and pecked his hand. In footage shared online, he quickly jerked from the ostrich. Don't dirty minds away from the ostrich, and shouted, "Oh, Christ, get hell," before driving off. And so I just set it out there. Have you been attacked by an animal? When I was about 7, says Trevor Jenkins, on holiday in Spain in the 70s, a monkey pulled my long hair. It was long because it was 70s. I was in floods of tears. And as the family car drove out the car park, an elephant ripped off the car mirror. We got the message. Spanish animals aren't to be trusted. Jeremy, Brittany here from the United States. I was spurred by a rooster in my right foot a few years ago. Spurred? How do you get spurred by a rooster?
One here from Dan in Hampshire. Morning, Mike. As an Aussie that has been dive-bombed by our version of the magpie, which is much bigger, every springtime, the folk in this village need to use the old Aussie trick to stop being swooped. You have to wear an ice cream tub on your head with eyes drawn on the back so they think you're watching them. True story. We've just been talking in the office here about how many of us have been attacked at some point or other by some form of flying beast or any wildlife. I mean, so we'll take your stories this morning.
Hello, this story is concerning wildlife. It's concerning a rhino.
A rhino? Blimey.
Right? Yeah,
okay.
rhino. I used to live in Kenya when I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
And we were in this wildlife park in a grey Morris Minor. This rhino started chasing us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, a very big welcome to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Whether you're listening on DAB+ radio, on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, always great to have your company. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. As a special gift to you, we, as usual, are not taking a live speech from the Chancellor or the Prime Minister, while other channels are. And if you just tuned over because they are, lovely to have you on board as well. I don't think I could do a whole 15-20 minutes of Rachel Reeves speaking. By the way, that could be Keir Starmer or Rachel Reeves. They're pretty much the same. Definitely AI now, guys. I don't think they really exist. That's my story. Although, actually, a useful announcement could actually affect people's lives on transport. Something that's useful. That isn't just for London. What a shocker, people. Anyway, lots to talk about. That is not the main topic of conversation, certainly. Going to be talking quite a lot about immigration and migration. Yes, I know we do that a lot. But that's for very good reason. It's such a massive, massive issue in this country, a massive issue for voters. And there are a number of massive stories involving it, including Labour being criticised for blaming migrant crossings on the weather, as the Home Office published data indicating that the Rwanda asylum scheme did actually have a deterrent effect on arrivals. Figures appear to show that migrant arrivals were far lower when Conservative ministers were set to launch deportation flights last year, even when the weather conditions were good for crossings. We'll talk more about that. Plus, white British people will become a minority in the UK population within the next 40 years. That's according to new research conducted by Professor Matt Goodwin of Buckingham University, who's been on the right side of history on this for a number of years. How significant an issue is that? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that in particular. And also Germany's new Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, basically a conservative, he's leader of the CDU in that coalition. He's defended his policy of turning most asylum seekers back at the border after judges ruled that it was likely to violate EU law. So why is it OK for the German Chancellor to do it, but not the British Prime Minister? I thought we were told it was EU law and European laws that would stop us doing it. Well, apparently not, because the German Chancellor is going to carry on doing it. The number of people they've turned away at their borders has gone up 45%. since Merz got into power. Maybe we should think about following suit. Plus, we're going to talk about the White House, which has attacked the BBC's coverage of the Israel-Hamas conflict in Gaza, accusing the broadcaster of taking Hamas's word as total truth. Caroline Leavitt, Donald Trump's press secretary, accused the BBC of having to repeatedly correct its reporting from the territory about aid distribution. We'll be talking to the brilliant Jake Wallace-Simons about that a little bit later. He knows his potatoes when it comes to that story. Joining us for all the chat today, large today, is Claire Pearsall, former Conservative government advisor at the Home Office. This may come in handy for quite a lot of the conversation. Great to have you here, as always. But the question I'm asking, we'll talk about this in just a few moments, but in particular, I mean, you know, you can always get in touch on all the big topics. Give us a call on anything you want to talk about. And let's face it, you tell me whether you want to talk about it or not, rather than me telling you. But white British people becoming a minority in the UK population within the next 40 years on current trajectories of immigration and birth rates with different populations. This is what a new report is predicting. What is your reaction to that? Is that a problem? And if it's a problem, why is it a problem? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? If it's a good thing or a bad thing, why is it? I want to know what you think the impact of that will be. Do give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk and your message to 87222. You can get in touch with us on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate and text costs one standard network rate message. Claire, I will come to you with that question in just a few moments. But first up, it's fascinating data coming out of the Home Office. I love it from the official data regarding channel migrants. So this is illegal migration, people who come on those small boats, although, as one of my guests pointed out yesterday, they're not that small anymore, these boats, with 50 people on them. But basically, the Labour has tried to blame the huge number of crossings, gone up, 40% in this year, in the same period compared to last year, saying, look, it's down to the weather. And I've always been of the view that actually the weather has more impact on how many people cross than any government policy. But when they publish data showing, look, the red days, as they call them, the days when, you know, the weather is actually calm enough, the wind's low enough and the waves are low enough, that actually you can make a load of crossings. We see a big spurt of people, like 1,200 on Saturday alone. We all remember how lovely the weather was on Saturday. Well, they've shown this, put this information out. Turns out, actually, on the red days, the calm weather days, when when Tories were in charge and they still had the Rwanda policy in place, there were fewer people coming than there are now without the Rwanda policy in place. And there was a notable jump after each decision which made it look like the Rwanda policy was going to disappear. And certainly once Labour got into power and said Rwanda policy gone, a big jump in the number of people arriving. Is this proof that the Rwanda policy, the Rwanda scheme, did actually provide a deterrence?
I don't think we can say it's absolute proof, but I do think it had an effect because it was talked about within migrant communities over social media channels. People were saying you may not get to stay in the United Kingdom. So it certainly had that aspect. But it makes you laugh with the Labour Party pointing and going, it's the weather, because when we were in government with the Conservative Party, every time we said, look, it's a really sunny day, we're going to get more crossings, the Labour Party laughed at us. So,
and anyway, by the way, on behalf of voters, that shouldn't be a sodding excuse for having no border control.
No, we absolutely shouldn't.
I know it doesn't happen often in Britain, but we do sometimes have nice weather. Yes. And I don't think we can have a policy where, absolutely, come on in because the weather's lovely.
No, absolutely not. But it does make you laugh. You get that level of hypocrisy from them. But Rwanda was a funny fish because it was never set up well. It was always doomed to fail, but it did have an effect. And at the moment, we have absolutely nothing.
No, exactly. And we've seen other European countries now looking at their sort of deterrent policy. My view is that the government had the right to do this. The courts didn't have the right to strike it down, and we should have done it. But we should have done it on a grand scale. It had to be anyone who arrives gets sent to Rwanda, not a couple of hundred people, which is what the original plan was. That's not enough of a deterrent. If you're willing to get one of those rickety boats to come across the channel and risk your life doing that, probably risking your life travelling across Europe a lot of the way to get to a completely safe country like, France, you're not going to be deterred by the small chance you might be sent to Rwanda when you have to start the trip all over again. That's the reality. We are a soft touch, and we've had, haven't we, French MPs and others pointing out, look, the reason why we have a load of people arriving is because we're a soft touch on benefits, soft touch on immigration. You get to stay here, really. If you get here, realistically, you're going to get to stay here, and you're not in a tent in the rain in Calais. Yes, it does rain in Calais. You are going to be in a. Okay, it might not be the most salubrious hostel or hotel or a private flat, but you've got accommodation and 3 square meals a day. What do you make of the German Chancellor? This is Friedrich Merz. They put together this coalition of basic Tories and Labour, CDU and the SPD there. He's basically a Tory leader, a Conservative leader there. He basically took office last month, finally, after very lengthy coalition debates, promising to end illegal immigration. Pretty strong announcement. And basically, he announced that his government, within days, the government would basically routinely reject migrants at the frontier on all their land borders, unless those migrants could prove they had a legitimate reason to enter the country. That they were either, you had to be a pregnant woman, an unaccompanied child, particularly vulnerable, had specific proof that you were the victim of some sort of abuse that meant you had to be allowed in, which of course most people cannot provide because it's not the case. They are economic migrants. Coming from, yes, basket case, terrible countries, but sorry, we don't have to let everyone in the world in. Now, since they've had that policy, there's been a 45% increase in the number of migrants turned away compared to the same period 12 months earlier. However, a Berlin court struck it down and said, no, this is not incompatible with EU rules. The Chancellor of Germany has said, no, we're going to carry on doing it. Why can't we do that?
Because we don't have a Prime Minister willing to stand up and say those things. We need to be a hell of a lot tougher. We haven't been. And even me in my woolly liberal mode, as you like to call it.
Sorry, I almost spat my tea out. You're a woolly liberal. Genuinely, I've just got tea everywhere now. You're a woolly liberal. When did that happen?
Well, you called me that ages ago when I had one of my moments on migration.
A brief moment.
Brief moment.
But we invited her back.
Teach me the error of my ways. We need to be a lot tougher, and I think that if Germany are turning around after saying refugees welcome, everybody come here,
thanks Angela,
to find that didn't work, then we need to be following suit. I do think it's slightly easier for Germany because their borders are land borders for the majority, so easier to turn people away. You can literally put up barriers.
Well, yeah, except for the whole, there's literally a big body of water between us and other countries.
But once you've got them here, it's very, very difficult, isn't it? Once they've come across the channel, it's not... we can't have that argument about turning boats back and wave machines and things like that. We can't.
If the rules don't let you do it, the rules are wrong, change the rules. Very simple, duh.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
I don't know how much longer the British people are going to put up with this. We're watching other countries deal with it, and, Italy, exchange with Albania and everything else. And there is a point where people just get enough is enough. It's fascinating how much the genuine woolly liberals, Labour government, large number of the Tories, Lib Dems and Greens and everyone else, Reformers we know is a grand exception in this, that they fundamentally don't really think that mass legal immigration is a problem or that mass illegal immigration is, but they don't really think it's something they want to stop, which is why they don't want to stop it. Because if you want to stop it, you can. Oh, look what Donald Trump did.
Yeah, you can. You just need to change some laws, and you actually have to have the kahunas to be able to go and do that and face down all of your critics. And we don't have a Prime Minister that wants to do it. We don't have a Home Secretary that's willing to do it, and a Foreign Secretary who doesn't know which way is up.
No, exactly. Well, let's talk about this interesting report from Professor Matt Goodwin. He's moved to Buckingham University. It's pretty much all the same people are moving. The only one of the universities in the country where you can actually speak freely and have views which aren't sort of, Ramona, wasn't lockdown a great thing? Everyone's got mental health problems. They are literally they've all got Israel terrible. They've all got exactly the same views. I cannot recommend his Substack enough, and I know he's doing a big report on this in the Substack, but reported in the Telegraph today, study he's done, research he's done, looking at the trajectory in terms of the number of people coming into this country, but also birth rates of people arriving in this country who are the descendants of relatively recent migrants to this country, but also the birth rate of those already in this country for many generations. He says that white British people will become a minority in the UK population within the next 40 years. So looking at migration, birth rates, death rates, up to the end of the 21st century, he predicts that we will white British people decline from their current position as 73% of the population to 57% by 2050, and then by 2063 we're slipping into a minority. And by the way, white British declined as people who do not have an immigrant parent. There'll actually be many white people who are non-British here, many Europeans, of course, millions of Europeans who are here, and many who will have one parent who is a migrant. But is this something to worry about, to be concerned about, and if so, why?
I don't think I'm concerned about it because, as you say, it's ignoring the fact that some people are white in this country but not necessarily British born.
Is it about the colour?
Do you know, I think in some arguments it is. I think in some communities, especially when you're looking at places like Birmingham, parts of Manchester, Bradford, with high Pakistani, Bangladeshi or Muslim populations in general, then yeah, you can't get away from having that conversation about the demographics.
Is that a skin colour issue, or is it a cultural issue in terms of people's values and people's belief systems?
I think it's absolutely both. You can have an awful lot of those communities who do integrate absolutely fine. Yeah. There isn't an issue. Sikh community, for example, where I live in Kent, perfectly well integrated, have been for decades, and are really good members of a community. Doesn't always happen. So I think that this is quite a complex argument to break down.
And that's the thing, it is, isn't it? But there is the main argument here is, I mean, if you imagine, let's say Nigeria had demographics where they were going to say within the next 40 years, black native Nigerians will be a minority of the population. I think they would be saying, well, that's what's happening to our country, that has happened. Yeah. We only get uncomfortable and everyone gets a little bit, and, I'm talking about this before the show, how do you handle this story, when you say the word white, because then, by definition, if you've got a concern about people of other colours, you must be racist. But it's not, it's about white British. Yeah. It's about the indigenous population, bearing in mind that was, 97% of the population until, well, certainly my birth, to the 1960s. Even when you had, the Windrush generation of Afro-Caribbean people coming, that was a tiny number of people. Yeah. A tiny, tiny number of people, and actually very well integrated into British society. Huge rate of, for instance, mixed marriage between white British and Afro-Caribbean British people. Now, we don't see that with many other immigrant populations. And again, sharing similar religious beliefs, such as those inform people's daily life. That is where I think a lot of the issues come. But again, the main issue, I think, for a lot of people will be simply the fact that huge amount of change in a very short period of time, a huge amount of change in one person's lifetime, that no one voted for, no one agreed to, no one was asked about, no one gave permission for, and it's just been imposed on us. Quite apart from the sheer number issue, we haven't built the reservoirs, the energy, the housing, the roads, blah, blah, blah. Quite apart from that, that has got a massive impact. We're already seeing the impact of a massive influx of people from Muslim countries, where the impact on our foreign policy, I'm telling you that Labour's foreign policy regarding Israel will be completely different if we didn't have a large Muslim population and very, very, very loud Muslim community leaders in this country who are talking up the pro-Palestine issue, as opposed to the only democratic ally we have in the Middle East, which is Israel. That has massively affected policy. The blasphemy law, long conversations on the show yesterday about we have a de facto blasphemy law, a man convicted of burning a Quran. We already had it because basically you don't burn a Quran because you're going to face death. Or death threats. Simple as that. That's a de facto blasphemy law, and nothing being done about it by the authorities, by the police. And why not? It's not done because we have a large population of Muslims, key Labour constituencies, and indeed in many other key constituencies. That's not an anti-Muslim comment, that's simply a statement of fact in terms of the influence of different people from different backgrounds and cultures and their influence on our politics. So there is a big change. Something Sweden and a few other Nordic countries found, particularly Sweden actually, because they had a massive influx of migrants after 2015, was the massive change in terms of their crime stats, in terms of the immigrant population. Huge. I get Ofcom for this all the time. People make complaints. Well, you just look at the figures. They're official figures in terms of, the rate of violence that's going on from immigrant populations there. It has a massive impact. And the country basically went, no, we don't want this anymore. We've seen what's happened in Holland. We're seeing what happens in Germany. We're seeing what's happened in Italy. We're seeing what's happened in France. People are saying, no, we didn't agree to this. We didn't vote for this. We don't want this. This is too much change. And fundamentally, this is about a democratic deficit, isn't it? You can't... Politicians were elected to do various things. They were never voted in to do what they have done in terms of opening our borders in European countries to anyone who fancied turning up here with a visa or without. And they didn't look at the long-term impact of that on the rest of the country, whether already, living here, whether white, black, Asian or whatever.
And they will never stand up and take responsibility for it. No politician.
Well, they'll just shout bigot and racist.
Of course they will. And we'll be called far right or have to have heinous views that we do. But it's a legitimate concern. And I think also we need to look at the Scandi countries and how they deal with an increasing birth rate. They are much better at helping families have more children. They look at schooling, they look at housing, they look at education, all of that, whereas we just don't. So people aren't having children.
So the indigenous population is only having like 1, maximum 2 children on average.
Precisely.
But immigrant populations of various different ethnicities and religions are having a large number more.
Yeah.
That will have a massive impact within.
Exactly.
I mean, predictions was that Muslim population of this country will be 1 in 10 in a couple of decades. That has got to have an impact on every aspect of our life in this country.
And it really does. And they will deal with it with generational living. They don't mind, granny, granddad, everybody living in similar housing or in the same house together. We don't do that as a general rule. But also,
God forbid.
Yes, I couldn't live with my father. But we don't encourage people to have children. We aren't a good nation when it comes to how can we ensure a parent can stay at home.
And enabling couples to have children. So much more I want to talk about. I mean, we're going to get to the really important stuff. We want to get to school banning skirts for girls. Literally, no. Everyone's going to have to be non-binary at this school, but also police facing stark choices over which crimes they actually can investigate. I mean, they already don't investigate most of them, so they're claiming it's about cuts, rubbish. It's about you running your police forces badly, and those Trump tariffs, of course, and indeed Donald Trump's press spokeswoman basically criticising the BBC, holding them up for scrutiny over their coverage of Gaza. Good for her. We'll be doing that a little bit later with Jake Wallace-Simons. So much more to come. I do want to hear from you and all the topics we're talking about, but in particular about white British people becoming a minority in the UK population within the next 40 years. What's your reaction to that report? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. This is Talk.
The most disturbing element of this, I think, is the fact that this man was attacked by a knife-wielding maniac who stabbed him, and then as he was on the floor, he was kicked by a passing delivery driver. Yeah. Those two individuals have not yet faced trial. I know they will do. But as yet, this one's been very much rushed through. Apparently the words are the more frightening thing. But even worse than that, The judge in this case said, we know that your protest was disorderly and likely to stir disordered behaviour because you were attacked twice.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. This is Talk 10:25. Let's get straight to your calls. 0344 499 1000 and your messages coming in about this new report from Matt Goodwin at Buckingham University. White British people become a minority in the UK population within the next 40 years. What's your reaction to that? John says, not something that Indigenous British people should accept. It's not inevitable. Pippa says, this is just unbelievable. The end of our once great country has begun. Chloe says, I fear this started to happen decades ago. Raymond said, to be honest, I think that's wrong. It will end up being a lot quicker than that. Donald said, maybe, but our culture will be gone long before that. And Dave says, I'm the son of a Caribbean migrant from the 1950s and although I'll be dead by then, I find it sad to think this is how the welcoming generosity of a nation is to be repaid. Jennifer says, looking back over decades in Britain, I believe that globalism is to blame for this. Well, let's go to Tony, who is in Surbiton, wants to have his say. Morning to you, Tony.
Morning, Julia.
Morning. What do you want to say about this?
Well, the reason I'm calling really is just to try and explain to people out there that how out of touch this government is when it comes to immigration. I'm a so-called immigrant, so obviously I come from South Africa. And I came into this country through the legal routes, and it costs an absolute fortune.
Yeah.
Okay, we have to... I mean, the costs involved are you have to pay the NHS in advance for 5 years, which is like £500 a year. Anyway, it costs an absolute fortune to come here. And you have to wait for 5 years before you can apply for right of residence.
Yep.
Now, Keir Starmer has now gone and targeted people by saying, number one, first, that you have to contribute to the tax, basically to the country. I've worked from the first week I got here, because obviously one of the big things that we're not entitled to, and it's on your British residence permit, it states there that you're not entitled to social benefits. So you have to start working the minute you get here. The second thing is that he says that we have to be able to speak the language. As part of your application for right to remain, you have to pay £150 to go and sit in front of someone to prove that you can speak English. So that's already catered for.
I think they're raising the standard at which people have to be able to speak or write English. That's the key thing, sort of A-level standard, not GCSE. What is your point, though? What point do you want to make? Because I have to say, it costs a lot to come here, and you have to work, and you have to contribute to the NHS in case you need it. A take test. I ain't got a problem with any of those things you stated.
No, but the thing is that we're a soft touch in terms of he's now gone and extended the leave to remain period from 5 years to 10 years. Now
that's before you can apply for indefinite leave to remain.
That's before you can apply for indefinite leave to remain. Now we're people who have paid good money and we're contributing, etc., etc.
So what? You still don't have a right to stay in the country until you're allowed to stay in the country. I don't mean to be unwelcoming, Tony. I'm glad you're contributing, but I don't think that people who've just been here 5 years should be allowed to be saying, I want a right to stay here forever.
No, but you have to apply, and there's a good chance that they can turn around and say, no, sorry, we don't believe that you should be staying here, and they can say to you, can you please get on the next flight?
I don't think they've been saying that to enough people, which is why we've got a lot of people here who've been here 5 years and then they claim benefits. What is your point? What point do you want to make regarding this actual new report? Do you think it's a problem, a good thing, something to be concerned about?
I think it's targeting the wrong people. I mean, if you really wanted to do something seriously about the illegal immigration in this country, you could get people straight off the beach when they arrive here, put them on a flight and send them straight back to where they came from.
Well, I mean, that's what I think we should be doing, but often they won't tell us where they're from. But we're not talking, the illegal migrants is in huge numbers. Nothing like the legal migrants, people like you who've able to come from other countries and live and work here. With that level of immigration and the subsequent birth rate of immigrants, white British people becoming a minority in the UK population within the next 40 years. Is that a good thing, a bad thing, or a neutral thing?
No, it's a very bad thing.
Why?
I mean, I understand that because I come from a country where this illegal migration is massive, and the crime rate and everything has soared because of it.
Usually Zimbabweans moved into South Africa, haven't they? Yeah.
You know, from the Nigerians, you know, you name it. And the thing is, those people come to your country, they don't find jobs, etc., etc. So the only thing that they can turn to is crime. So your crime rate escalates at a furious rate.
All right. I'm going to have to leave it there, Tony. An interesting perspective as an immigrant yourself. Thank you for that. I want to go to Kirsten. She's in London. Hello, Kirsten.
Hi, Julia. How are you?
Very well. What do you want to say?
Well, again, I'm also an immigrant, now a British citizen. Came through legal means. And first time I came to London to visit with my mother, who had studied here, to come here to learn
Where
English.
are you from?
I'm from Honduras. And my husband is a British born and bred citizen, white. And back 21 years ago, I stepped into London for the first time as a tourist. And back then, I told my mum, where are the British people? Where are the English people? 21 years ago.
And what did you mean by that?
I couldn't see white, native British people. And so my mother said to me, well, look, a lot of them are actually British, but not white, just different kind. But if that were to happen in my home country, like not have Hondurans in Honduras, that would be awful, wouldn't it? And no one.
Are you making a distinction then? As it sounds like your mum was saying that it's not the same. It is the same thing. It's just so someone whose ancestry goes back, many centuries in this country. I should say native British, which means white. Come on, it does. As opposed to people who are British now, born in this country, but parents came in the last few generations.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that one cannot become British, but why would anyone be happy that the native population has been replaced?
I mean, it's an interesting question. I think in any other country that would be a legitimate question that would be asked, but it's not allowed to be asked in white European countries, is it? That's the thing.
And that as a Hispanic and a foreigner, I have been telling my white British husband since we met over a decade ago, why is it okay to point out those things for other races? But when it comes to pointing that for white people, oh, you're racist if you say that.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah. Kirsten,
it's terrible.
Very interesting perspective. Thank you. Isn't that interesting? The first two callers on this were immigrants themselves, making similar points. 10:32 is the time. Love to hear from you on this. 0344 499 1000. Do get in touch. Up next, going to talk to Mark Littlewood. We're also going to find out what is going on with Germany in terms of how they are dealing with mass migration, particularly illegal migration, because we were just discussing the Chancellor Friedrich Merz is basically saying, no, we're going to keep turning away people on the border. Why can't we do that here? This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. 10:35 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Claire Pistol still with me as well. Claire, just get your reaction first before we go to our next guest, who are a couple of our callers, migrant callers themselves, both sort of saying, effectively, I don't know why it's a problem to discuss that if there is this massive change in the British population, that you shouldn't be able to discuss it and say that this isn't a good thing necessarily.
It was quite refreshing to hear people from other cultures originally saying, well, why are you so scared about talking about white people?
But people are.
Yeah, and it's just really refreshing. These are people that have come to this country through legal means, paid a lot of money, etc., etc. But the first caller, Tony, was not happy that he may have to wait longer to get indefinite leave to remain, or not him, but other people in his situation. But if those are the rules of the country, I would expect the same behaviour.
Yeah, but again, let's see you earning for 10 years, but rather than just a few years before we say you can stay. And as we know, there's loads of nonsense talked about the net contribution that migrants make. It's absolutely on average not the case. It is simply not the case, because an awful lot of people are not are coming here. Yes, they're working, but they're not actually earning enough to be doing making a net contribution. Indeed, huge number of Brits, almost half Brits, don't, in terms of your financial contribution, your earnings, pay more than you are taking out. But then not that people aren't doing useful work. If you're doing a care, at least you're doing useful work. Rather more useful than us sitting here yapping. I'm just saying, we all know it's true. Let's go to Mark Littlewood now. He's the Director of Popular Conservatism, to talk about a bunch of these issues. Good morning to you, Mark.
Hi, Julia. Good to be with you.
There's lots to talk about in terms of migration policy, but let me put the question to you about white British people becoming a minority in the UK population within the next 40 years, according to this report by Matt Goodwin. He knows what he's talking about. He's an expert in this field. What is your reaction to that? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it a neutral thing? Nothing to be concerned about? Something to be worried about? What do you think?
Well, a couple of points. Firstly, I think even Matt Goodwin would concede that it's quite difficult to actually make these predictions over long time horizons. I can remember about 10 years ago being told on the present trajectory, by halfway through this millennium, Italy will be down to a population of just 6 people. Yeah, but it's pretty unlikely we'll stay on that trajectory for the next 500 years, right? So, I mean, he's only measuring 2 generations, and he's right that that is the present trajectory. Should we be worried? Well, I'm not per se especially concerned, I have to say. I mean, I guess in several hundred years' time, we're all going to be coffee-coloured, right, because of sort of intermarriage and the rest of it. So that will happen at some point. It will be very unusual to be obviously completely black or completely white or completely of one race. I'm much more worried about the culture of the United Kingdom rather than the skin colour of the
but that's the thing, I think that's where people suddenly go, they're white, they go, oh, a bit anxious. When it's talking about white British people, it's not talking about white people, it's talking about white Brits, as in native indigenous Brits. We are a white country indigenously. We have been. People say, oh, the left says we're a nation of immigrants. No, we're not. I mean, America is. We are not. We were like 97%, indigenous population for most of the last, 6 centuries. So it's a load of rubbish. We are. That is important. We shouldn't get waylaid by the colour of the skin. It's white British, as opposed to people who are the children of those who've arrived, or the grandchildren of those who've arrived in the last century.
Yeah, it's the British part of that matters to me more than the white part of that. So, I could imagine an influx of a particular cohort of immigrants who would assimilate very easily into our culture, seamlessly, who would be delighted to become British, who would celebrate Britain, who would admire Britain. That wouldn't cause me any consternation. It's a problem of a complete failure and lack of cultural assimilation. And as you were just touching on as well, Julia, quite apart from the sort of heritage point, there's a major economics point. I mean, I may have mentioned this number on your show before, but here's a number to conjure with. If you were to take total government expenditure and divide it by the roughly 70 million people there are in Britain, it comes to 17,250 quid per annum per person. That means if you're not contributing in tax £17,250 per annum, you are basically a net beneficiary, not a net contributor.
That includes kids and pensioners, though.
Well, yeah, of course it does. Yeah, I mean, it's right that some cohorts are more expensive than others. People around about our age, Julia, tend to be a little cheaper than when we're going through school or when we need care in our old age. But if you want the barefaced average, that's about the average. Yeah. You therefore, I mean, you might have more of an a la carte menu that older people need to contribute more or need to have contributed more over their lifetime. But the bare average is that. So if you are typically not paying that in, you're going to be taking out more than you're paying in. And that's quite a hurdle. And I think we should almost treat that as the club membership fee, quite apart from the cultural points.
Yeah.
That's how we should deal with the economic points.
Yeah, exactly. And again, we can't get all these people off benefits. Well, you know, we've got an awful lot of care work that apparently needs to be done. I'm not sure we need to import people from other countries to do it. Let's talk also about dealing with illegal migration, because that's largely an issue of legal migration. We've got two big stories here. One interesting showing that the government Home Office's own data showing that, look, I know we've seen a 40% increase in the number of illegal migrants arriving on our shores on channel boats, but in the first few months of the year. But that's largely because we've had quite a lot of good and calm weather. And they showed all the days, they call them red days, and there's a big graph showing, look, you know, these are the days when it's actually easier to come over. Trouble is, they used the same data for the same period last year under the Tory government. Fewer people came on those red days than are coming now on the red days under Labour. But crucially, there was a big change around the time that the Rwanda scheme was dropped, and when there were big sort of court decisions regarding the Rwanda scheme. It does appear there seems to be some evidence that the Rwanda scheme did deter small boats. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I think there's pretty strong evidence for that, and it also stands to reason, doesn't it? If you remember, we also saw quite an uptick in people going to Ireland. I'm not wishing just to shuffle our problem onto the Republic of Ireland.
Oh, I thought that was funny.
Well,
they shafted us over Brexit. Sod them.
True enough. And
I say that as the child of an immigrant from Ireland. Well,
but all of the straws in the wind, I think, suggest that it would act as some form of a deterrent, and it stands to reason, doesn't it? I mean, it would be surprising if it didn't.
Yeah.
And I must admit, I'm a bit forlorn that it seems that having run out of all options, that we're now relying on the rather crappy British weather to turn
We're allowed to say that word? Sorry for that language, folks.
Sorry, am I not used to that? We're not
Probably not. Word, probably not.
The poor British weather is apparently now our great defence about migration.
Yeah, it's a bit pitiful, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you know, we were going to smash the gangs, but it turned out to be a bit too sunny today, so we didn't get round to it.
Yeah.
I mean,
no, that's literally what the government is saying. I've got Claire Pearsall, ex-Home Office, nodding along here. But it was something that the Tories used to claim as well, and Labour used to tell them off for it. What do you make of the new Chancellor of Germany? He's just been in office for a month or so, Friedrich Merz. He basically got into office and said, we're going to end illegal immigration. Pretty stark promise to have made. He's basically, you know, a Tory in a coalition with the Labour Party over there, trying to keeping out the right-wing AFD, who are rather more staunch to this issue. But they basically had a border policy on the land. You know, if you're arriving here by land, unless you are very vulnerable, child, pregnant woman, you've got a very, very, very good evidence that you are somebody who needs asylum, you're going to be turned away. There's been a massive increase, 45% increase in the number of migrants who've arrived who have been turned away at the border. A Berlin court struck that down, saying this was probably in breach of EU laws. Merz has said, no, we're going to carry on with it. If they can do that, why can't we?
Yes, I think that's right. Well, we can. It's just our present government doesn't have the will to do so, Julia, right? So, I mean, you need two things, basically, to get this right. You need a compelling and organised and efficient enforcement mechanism. And obviously that's in part due to your geography. Obviously, Germany tend to be people coming over land, I would guess, right? We're in a slightly different position as an island, but those are all practical considerations. Are you picking these people up, identifying them at the right time? And I think border force in the UK is not sufficiently efficient. So you need a very clear enforcement mechanism that requires quite a lot of resource. Secondly, you need a coherent, sensible and smart legal system, right? So once you've caught these people, they only need some intern human rights lawyer to be able to stay here forever and a day because of all of their rights under ECHR and the Human Rights Act. You've got a problem. So you need a decent enforcement mechanism. I would attest that we don't really have one, and we should get one. And then you need to actually make it very plain that if the courts strike it down, we're going to change the law. In my view, that means we've got to leave the ECHR. Others may disagree, but if you tend to have these very soft laws there's no point in doing the enforcement.
No, indeed.
And,
it's interesting.
You've got very hard laws. You need the enforcement to be good. Otherwise, people will just slip through the cracks.
Indeed.
We've got neither.
Well, the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, has said that judges are granting exceptional asylum claims in a third of all cases, so not very exceptional at all. Murderers, paedophiles and others being allowed to stay in Britain due to their right to a family life. This is, again, utter misinterpretation, misinterpretation of these articles in the human rights legislation. I'm still, Article 8 is the key one, completely ignoring the duty of care to other people of the population, our rights to safety and security of our nation. Clearly written, there's 2 paragraphs in that Article 8, they completely ignore the second paragraph. The issue isn't leaving the ECHR, the issue isn't anything else other than we need to get rid of a whole cohort of our judges, don't we?
Well, you might say that, and generally I would agree with you, Julia, that I'm very worried about judges becoming political activists. I think they've done so. But we've given the judiciary these rather vague terminology and said to them, you go interpret it, please. What we would need is Parliament to specify what is meant by Article 8, that what it doesn't include. So there's much less wriggle room, much less discretion.
I think they'd still find their way around it.
Well, I mean, I think if you stipulate, for example, that this Article 8 does not apply if you have been charged with any of the following crimes, set it aside, right? Murder, child abuse, armed robbery, whatever. You could do that. That would be clear and unambiguous. But you could not take it into account.
I think there'd be a court case. There'd be a court case to strike down that law under human rights law. That's the madness we're in.
Well, that's fine, but I would also change the Supreme Court as it happens. But Parliament are wishing things, but not willing to legislate for things, right?
Yeah, and at the end of the day, you've got to stand up for that. Can I just quickly, I do want to get you, used to be the Institute of Economic Affairs, just on Donald Trump and his tariffs. We had those 25% steel and aluminium tariffs, and then and then they were going to be raised massively for everyone else, but not for us because we got a deal. Keir Starmer did that phone deal. Apparently nothing's been signed, nothing's on the dotted line yet. So we were going to have 0 tariffs. Then we have 10% on everything else. And then he's announced that tariffs are going to go up to 50% on steel and aluminium when he was speaking at a steel factory in America. And that came into force overnight. But apparently, no, we're going to still go back to 25%. Absolute chaos. Still, I mean, it's supposed to be 0%, but it isn't. What impact is this having on our economy?
Well, this sort of uncertainty is pretty unhelpful by President Trump, right? I mean, generally speaking, I look forward to a world in which there aren't tariffs, although most of the problems actually blocking decent free trade across the world aren't so much about tariffs. They're about protectionist regulations rather than price. And we
But you do need to protect your steel industry or your agriculture. You do need to do that.
Well, I think there are certain areas where you need to be sure that you've got security of supply, right? I think if you're entirely reliant on one rather dodgy country for your steel or for your energy or for your food, you're in trouble. But we don't need to be wholly self-sufficient, right? We're not going to grow our own tropical fruit. We're not going to make our own red wine. So trade generally helps. Yes, there are some sectors that you need to be a bit more careful than others. If we suddenly had no ability to get our hands on steel, that might be a national emergency. If we could not get our hands on red wine, that would just be a shame. I don't know. It might be a national emergency for some, but broadly that would be a shame. But, I mean, there's 2 things I'd say about the Trump thing. Firstly, he is being colossally unpredictable. And at some point, you need to be able to sit down with this guy, sign a deal and know it sticks, rather than wait for the next press briefing to see whether it's changed at all. The second thing I'd say is wherever we end up, it looks like it's of considerable benefit to us that we're not in the EU as far as our relationship with the USA goes. However unpredictable the president might be, it looks like we've got an extremely good chance, maybe not a certainty, but an extremely good chance to be able to trade with the US on better terms than we would have if we were still a member of the European Union.
Very good point. Mark Littlewood from the Public Conservatism Group, thank you so much indeed for that. Claire Pearsall, on Trump tariffs, I mean, every day, we didn't even know, I think the steel industry yesterday didn't know whether Britain would be exempt from this rise to 50%, and then we found it today. But that can be a benefit to us, but it also means if other countries have got these tariffs, they're not going to export to America and they're going to dump their steel on us. That also damages our steel industry.
It certainly does, and I thought we were supposed to have had that deal signed and sealed originally to have no tariffs on it, but still not. But with Trump, it's kind of pick a number, any number, which then may change at the end of the week. So I think that we have to just kind of wait this one out.
He does like a round number, doesn't he?
He does.
He does. I like the clear. So 10%, 25%, 50%. There you go. But again, a lot of fanfare over that deal with Keir Starmer and all that love-in phone call.
Yeah.
But yeah, still not signed and sealed. Doesn't count until it's on in paper.
Precisely.
I do not know how people running these businesses are coping with this lack of any certainty, because certainty is absolutely crucial for business confidence, isn't it? 10:50 is the time. Up next, going to talk to Ralph Schulhammer about what on earth is going on with migrants. So what is going on with the Dutch government, the British, the German government, and try and sneak in the fact that heat pumps may be going out of favour with even Ed Miliband. I know. That's up next. This is Talk.
The French police will now be able to catch these people in shallow water. I can't go on anymore. It is above my penis. What am I to do? I mean, what an absurd ruling. What an absurd ruling. You know?
It's just ridiculous. Yeah, but for 2 years and 3 months, they've been watching the migrant, waving them goodbye, because they've got a law that bans them from paddling in the sea.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. 10:53 is the time. Let's go straight to our next guest, Ralph Schulhammer. He's a political theorist and professor at Webster University in Vienna. Very good morning to you.
Good to talking to you, Julia. How are you doing?
Very well. As usual, I've yapped on far too much. We've talked about loads of other things and we're getting too late, so let's get straight to it. Let's talk about Germany. Franz Merz, the new Chancellor, has basically had the asylum policy struck down by a Berlin court, saying you can't just turn away people on the border as he started doing, even though it's been massively successful. But he said he's going to carry on. Do you think he's going to get away with carrying on?
No, I don't think so. And it's time for the legislative to really jump into action. It's the same problem they have in Britain. It's the same problem in France and other countries. Over the last 60 years, we have created a legal framework that makes it more or less impossible now for many countries to control the flow of migration. The reason for this is because these frameworks were developed in a completely different world from the one we live in now. And there's an unwillingness, I think mostly driven also by very activist NGOs, to be honest, to adapt these frameworks to the reality we live in. And unless this is happening, you pretty much only have two choices. You can ignore the law which I think is not a good precedent, or you can follow the law and do something that for good reasons your own people will not like very much.
Yeah.
So the third option, the best option, would be to change and adapt the law, but there seems to be a lack of willingness to do this.
Yeah, well, indeed, a difficulty doing this. Same problems that we have in the UK, where basically the law is being made up as they go along by judges rather than dictated by Parliament.
Yeah, and I think one simply has to admit that it's very, very odd when this one British politician, forgive me for not remembering his name, was saying that criticizing...
Keir Starmer?
No. I remember
he's very
him.
forgettable.
Yes. But I forgot that criticizing the European Convention on Human Rights is akin to what the Nazis did. I mean, this is always the go-to point,
yes.
right? Everything is like the Nazis, everything the Nazis did. I mean, I just read today in the Telegraph a new study by my good friend Matt Goodwin.
Yeah.
Right? According to the study, in 40 years, white British people will be a minority in their own country. That is not good. When did the people vote for that? I mean, that's a very serious question. They never voted for this. And the fact that we treat this as if it is completely normal is absurd. If I would show you a number that says Saudi Arabia will be majority Christian in 40 years, your question would be, why is that? What happened? What did the Saudis do? How could that take place? And in Britain, we say, well, this is then these weird BBC documentaries where they say, well, somehow Britain has always been a nation of colored people.
Yes.
No, it hasn't. Right? Nobody's more pale than the people of Britain. I mean this is a compliment.
Right.
Right? So this is just bad. And by the way, it's not racist to say this. I'm a multiculturalist, and I think that every culture at some point should have their own country. But I don't think that all of them should live in Europe or the United Kingdom. And I believe that most of the British people and European people would agree with me on that.
Yeah, I mean, I very much think that British culture should be not just the dominant, but the only culture in Britain. I'm quite old-fashioned. I'm very relaxed about the colour of people's skin, but nevertheless, it is an indicator of change that wasn't agreed to or voted for. What do you make of also what's going on in the Dutch government? I know you keep abreast of politics across Europe. I mean, Geert Wilders, regarded as far right, hard right, whatever term people want to use, he's sort of triggered an asylum protest that's brought down the Dutch government. Can you explain very briefly what's happened there?
Well, in a nutshell, Geert Wilders made a huge strategic mistake, and this was he pretty much sacrificed the possibility to become prime minister himself to get his party into government. And in that government, in this coalition government, right, the other parties were more or less constraining his party from doing what the people expected it to do. This is now a kind of break glass in case of emergency situation for Wilders, because his party is losing popularity in the polls.
Because if we're electing you, it's because we want you to actually get the job done. And that's the risk of going into any coalition and actually being in power and not being able to do anything.
Yes, but there's another factor that's going to become more prevalent, I think, over this year and the next couple of years. And I'm an example for this myself, because I admit I have been slightly radicalized over the last few months myself, which is that originally the argument was we need to curb the inflow of migration and then do assimilation and integration. I more or less came to the conclusion I believe this is no longer enough. Whatever term you want to use, whatever word you want to, we can have a semantic conversation about this, but remigration is going to become an issue. There needs
deportation, you mean?
Well, deportation, for me, that sounds a little bit like forced. I mean, I'll give you an example. I got my PhD in the United States, and when I got my visa, I had to sign a piece of paper that said, once you're done with your PhD, you have to leave the country. Yeah. You can come back as a tourist, right? But you cannot immediately stay and live here. And this is what I did, right? I still love the United States. I was an immigrant, and then I had to remigrate because these were the stipulations. Those were the terms. And I think this is the same thing we have to do in Europe. You flee, for example, from Assad in Syria because you're an Islamist, and now you have the Islamists in charge, so you can go back. Right? This idea that the European Court of Human Rights has now defined that poverty in your home country is an asylum, is a cause for asylum. I'm sorry, that's madness.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Again, there's a good few billion people who could claim that, and I'm not sure we've got room for everybody. Ralph Schulhammer didn't get time to talk about net zero, but I'm sure as a sane figure on that, delighted at the idea that we're probably going to be dropping targets for getting these unusable, very expensive, useless heat pumps into people's homes. Ralph Schulhammer, thank you very much indeed for that. Love to hear your thoughts on everything you've had to say. Coming up in the next hour, we are going to be hearing more from Claire Pearsall, I promise. She's been sitting very patiently, quietly. We're going to find out why Donald Trump criticised the BBC over their policies and their reporting on Gaza. And we're going to talk about policing cuts. Will that mean fewer crimes are going to be investigated? This is Talk.
We've just been talking in the office here about how many of us have been attacked at some point or other by some form of flying beast or any wildlife. I mean, so we'll take your stories this morning.
Hello, this story is concerning wildlife. It's concerning a rhino.
A rhino? Blimey.
Right? Yeah,
okay.
rhino. I used to live in Kenya when I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
And we were in this wildlife park in a grey Morris Minor. This rhino started chasing us. There's me and my sister in the back seat.
Right.
It was like something out of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
We were turning around saying, "Believe it, Dad. Just put your foot down, Dad. We're in a field." Put your foot down, this rhino was chasing us.
One from Mark here in Derby. Went on holiday for our first romantic holiday to Tunisia years ago. Decided to take my girl into a petting zoo. I got a bag of food to feed the animals. A giant goat then went for me, putting its front legs over my shoulders and proceeding to headbutt me over a fence into one of the pens, covering me in the food and making my nose bleed. I got out of the pen, then the goat and all his mates attacked me again, sending me running and screaming like a girl out of the zoo, with my girlfriend rolling with laughter on the floor.
A tarantula climbed up the bottom of the bed on the sheet.
Yeah.
And it walked all the way up. It's eyeball to eyeball.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, what am I going to do when it climbs over my face? But then a miracle happened. It raised its 2 front legs and waved them around. And then it turned around and walked down the side of the sheet.
Boris Johnson been attacked by an ostrich. The former PM was enjoying a safari trip with his family when the bird leaned into his car and went oi oi and pecked his hand. In footage shared online, he quickly jerked from the ostrich, don't dirty minds away from the ostrich, and shouted, "Oh, cripes, get hell," before driving off. And so I just set it out there. Have you been attacked by an animal? When I was about 7, says Trevor Jenkins, on holiday in Spain in the 70s, a monkey pulled my long hair. It was long because it was the 70s. I was in floods of tears. And as the family car drove out the car park, an elephant ripped off the car mirror. We got the message. Spanish animals aren't to be trusted. Jeremy, Brittany here from the United States. I was spurred by a rooster in my right foot a few years ago. Spurred? How do you get spurred by a rooster?
One here from Dan in Hampshire. Morning, Mike. Is an Aussie that has been dive bombed by our version of the Magpie, which is much bigger.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good morning. Welcome back to the show. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, and this is Talk. We are the home of common sense, and whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, it is fabulous to have your company. Lots of you getting in touch, in particular about this new report from Matt Goodwin, Professor Matt Goodwin. We don't get him on the show because he's kind of signed up elsewhere, but I certainly follow his Substack, and he is a very, very, very important figure talking about immigration issues and the impact on our culture and all of that. But he's now at the University of Buckingham, and he said under current trajectories, where we are in terms of the number of people who are coming into this country, the birth rates of those who were indigenous population and those who are immigrant population and their descendants, but also the death rate and all of that, you're looking at white British people becoming a minority in the UK population within the next 40 years. That's what his report states. I want to know from you, is that a good thing, a bad thing, a neutral thing, something to worry about, something to celebrate, something that we should be discussing? I'd love to hear your reaction. Tell me what you think. Give us a call on 0344 499 1000, text on 87222, or you can get in touch on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. Interesting, actually, first 2 calls we took in the first hour, both from people who are migrants, both actually expressing concern about that issue. But there we are. We're also going to be talking more about those migrant crossings, and basically the Home Office saying, oh, they've gone up, those boats have gone up because the weather's been good. And it turns out actually, well, when the weather's been good before, the Rwanda policy was dropped after the Labour Party got into power last July. They didn't have as many people even on those nice, calm, sunny days when the weather meant that calm seas made crossings much easier. Also going to talk about the White House attacking the BBC's coverage of the Israel-Hamas conflict, accusing the broadcaster of taking Hamas's word as total truth in Gaza. Caroline Leavitt, Donald Trump's press secretary, accused the BBC of having to repeatedly correct its reporting from the territory about aid distribution, and these claims from Hamas really unproven that IDF soldiers had opened fire on those getting aid. Meanwhile, extraordinarily, the Director General of the BBC, Tim Davie, he's been asking for the licence fee to go up because apparently they've had a decade of grinding cuts at the organisation. Trust me, if you've ever been in the BBC, that is not an organisation afflicted by cuts. You will be blown away by the overstaffing. I mean, the people have a lot of time to sit around reading The Guardian. Put it that way. Also, Britain's most senior police chiefs have directly warned Keir Starmer they will face stark choices about which crimes they investigate if the Treasury does push ahead with cuts in the spending review next week. Given they don't investigate most of the crimes anyway, I'm not sure we'll really notice, do you? Anyway, Claire Pistol is here. She's former Conservative government advisor, formerly at the Home Office. This comes into virtually every story today, which is fantastic, which is why we love having you here. We talked a lot in the last hour about a lot of those migration stories, so let's touch on them briefly and get to some of the other topics in this half hour. Just in terms of the Rwanda scheme, you at the Home Office, apparently it looks like it did deter small boats, and it's not just down to good weather, more people come, bad weather, fewer people come. What do you make of that?
It's a really strange one, because I was a massive opponent against the Rwanda scheme because it was badly announced, badly put together. It cost us a lot of money, £700 million.
And there were, was it three or four people who went? Yeah, but they were all voluntary.
Yes, which we paid them to go. So not only did
we've got to stop paying people to go to other.
I know. I mean, I can volunteer.
I have to get up for work to get paid to go to foreign countries.
I can volunteer to go somewhere else if they would like to pay for me.
I'm an Albanian. I'd like to be repatriated to, I don't know, Costa del Sol, please. You know.
Yeah, no, Barbados. I'm quite happy to do that.
I should have aimed higher. I should have aimed higher.
You should. I mean,
I'm absolutely from the Bahamas. I really need to be sent to Nassau.
Exactly, and be
£3,000, please.
5 years' worth of payments as well. So it's not just a one-off payment. You get to look after them. But it's quite interesting when you start looking at laws and what we need to do, and the ECHR, which is always the big thing that everybody gets upset about. I don't think we need to leave the ECHR. I do think that we need to look at Article 8, the right to a family life. That needs to go. It needs to stop.
Well, again, no, people just need to read the full one. I've said this a million times. I'm sorry, I bore you about this, guys, but there are two paragraphs. The judges are ignoring the second part. Judges in the script, we think of them as neutral. I think we can safely say after we've now had a blasphemy law yesterday, that with Hamid Choskan being convicted, they're not neutral. These are political activists, and they're pretty much all on the left. We used to think of them all as funny right-wing people who didn't know who the Beatles were. No, you don't get appointed to being a judge unless you sign up to all the DEI madness, and that all goes along with migrants, illegal migrants in particular from Africa, from the Middle East, are by definition the people at the bottom of the pile, and therefore you have to help them. We're living in insane territory, really are. What do you make of this report, this research by Professor Matt Goodwin of Buckingham University, one of the few universities where people are allowed to publish research like this without facing the sack? Basically saying, look, on the current trajectories, and trajectories do change. There are different reasons why you get more people arriving at certain times, but we have had a huge influx of migrants from not just the EU, but also from outside the EU, largely from India, Nigeria, Pakistan, and countries with very different cultures, very different backgrounds and religions. But white British people will become a minority in the UK population within the next 40 years. Your reaction to that, because we've talked about it and it's really interesting, and the guest Ralph Schellhammer we just spoke to a few moments ago in Austria, pointing out, if I said earlier, if Nigeria was going to be like a white country within 40 years by a majority, or he said Saudi Arabia was going to be a majority Christian country, you would ask questions about that, and the people of that country might say, how has that happened? Why has that happened? And we're not sure that's a good thing. Is this just about the huge amount as well as the pace of change in this country?
I think it's also perception, because there are parts of the country where there are higher levels of immigration. Now, I live in Kent, and even in my county there are parts of it which are have a much higher proportion of people who are not born in the UK, who come from migrant parents, than where I live, for example, in a small village out in the countryside.
But isn't it the reality? There'll be people that you won't... OK, you might hear the accents from people's voices, but as a general rule, given that the vast majority of people in this country are white, if those people are white, largely white Europeans, you don't notice that they're immigrants in the way that you might notice somebody of colour. Yeah. Although, because I would always assume that someone, if they're black or Asian, was born in this country, having lived. London is such a multiracial city. Yeah. I don't want it to be a multicultural city. I don't believe in multiculturalism. Multiracial. I don't have. But often people coming from different countries do have different cultures.
They do, and I think it goes as to how well those areas deal with that. And are people willing, if they come over here, are they willing to embrace British life? And I think we've had this conversation more and more. What are British values? How can you encourage people to integrate? Should you encourage people to integrate? It is a really big subject. I think that this piece of research on its own isn't enough to concern me as much, but I do think it was really important to have a conversation about it.
Yeah.
And if that's
and without
the start
people
of it,
shouting racist or bigot.
Absolutely.
But even you and me, who are pretty clear about giving our views, there's a bit of uncomfortable, it's clearly a change. I'm not entirely sure when I look at the changes to this country in recent years that it's been a good change. When I look at crime stats, when I look at integration, when I look at the impact of certain communities in terms of pushing laws and values that I disapprove of, in terms of our attitudes to Jews. I mean, where do you think the anti-Semitism came from, folks? We imported it. I mean, I'm sorry, large swathes of Muslim countries and Muslim populations of Muslim countries are virulently anti-Semitic. It's part of a lot of the culture. That's why, that's why Gaza's a problem. They are raised to believe that Jews are somehow, subhuman and need to be gone from the planet. You can't import that culture and then go, oh, I'm really surprised that's happened. You can't, but also in terms of, other issues we need to tackle. One of the most integrated groups of population in this country would have been Afro-Caribbean arrivals. Windrush generation onwards. Mixed race marriages and relationships and that. But we also have a massive issue of single parent families. Something like 45% in that community. Not among black people in this country, among Afro-Caribbeans, Nigerians, population, huge number of Nigerians, that's not an issue there. They're doing fine in school and in work and in marriages. We have completely different unemployment rates, for instance, from people from Bangladesh and Pakistan and people from India. Educational attainment, completely different from those two groups. Chinese doing very well. Jewish population, they are very, very different. There is a big argument about where people come from, seems to have a massive impact on their ability to integrate, their ability to assimilate, and their success levels in this country. Maybe that's a conversation we should have about which countries we want to have people arrive from. So people are very happy with Ukrainians arriving. People are very happy, temporary. People are very happy with Hong Kong Chinese. Apparently we're all racist, but absolutely, those people are British, they have a right to be here. And these are a load of people who are entrepreneurial, hardworking, who've come from a culture of achievement and high education. Yes, please.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with having an immigration system that does that. Who's to say that that is racist or bigoted because you want the brightest and the best in your country? Now, surely every country wants that. We've got a
load of our doofuses here already. We've got the people who don't work and who don't make a contribution.
Well, exactly.
Here. We've got those. We don't need to import any more.
No, we don't. And I think that
you know who you are, by the way.
But we can't have a conversation without one side of the argument chucking across an abusive, you're right-wing racist.
And again, the point is, if Saudi Arabia or India or Nigeria or any other or our Caribbean country, they were suddenly majority white, they would have something to say about it. And they would be a legitimate conversation, so why isn't it here? Let's talk about something else here. Let's talk about crime. We've got the spending review, Rachel Reeves, next Wednesday, and a lot of pressure on that because basically there isn't any money to spend. But 15 billion quid in transport projects, and that's largely actually for the Midlands and the North. Now, this is a good thing, whether it's buses, whether it's trams, whether it's rail links, this is a good thing. Nearly always, all the money goes on the South East. And yes, there are an awful lot of people. The same number of people live in London as live in Scotland, for goodness sake. There is an argument for why we need the transport links. But so often the North and the Midlands are forgotten, and even on the HS2 issue, we'll keep the hub in Euston, which no one wants, but not actually provide decent rail links between the great cities of the North and the Midlands. So I'm all in favour of that. But again, where's that money coming from? But there's a lot of pressure on other departments to see cuts. We know the Home Office is very worried where you used to work. Yeah. The most senior police chiefs in the country, led by Sir Mark Rowley, the head of the Met Police, they've written to the Prime Minister directly saying that cuts to the Home Office budget will have far-reaching consequences, and basically saying they'll have to face stark choices about which crimes they investigate and which they don't if we push ahead with more cuts. Isn't the reality that they already do that? The vast majority of thefts and burglaries are not properly investigated. Oh yeah, a copper might turn up after 3 days, but
if you're lucky,
I'm very aware that the only reason that my bag thief is in court next week, I think it is, or the week after. Very excited. Sorry, alleged bag thief. That because I provided the evidence, they wouldn't have gone looking for it.
No, and the fact is that you kept pushing them to make a decision as to whether they were going to bother to find.
I didn't tell them whether. I told them they would.
Precisely.
My emails were very firm.
You can do that, and a lot of people can't for whatever reason. And every time there is a spending review and you are in a government department, you will stand up and say, my government department is the most valuable. Yeah. We can't possibly cut anything. Bad things will happen. The sky will fall in. The lights will go out. It's awful. So every department does that. Now, do I think the Home Office needs to be looked at a little differently? Yes, I do. I also think it's too big of a department and you need to split it up. Because if you do that, you can actually manage the budget.
Well, they're dealing with crime and immigration. These are two of the biggest issues for a lot of people.
They're absolutely huge. And at the moment, we underfund our police forces anyway, and we have done for some considerable period of time. That needs to improve. But we need to look at where you can cut corners.
But police also spend an inordinate amount of time doing a lot of things which aren't
Precisely.
About. Don't police hurty tweets. No non-crime hate incidents. You should have no bit. It's not a crime. Don't. 6 people shouldn't turn up on the door of somebody who's written something on social media, or 2 people turning up.
No.
Alison Pearson, the Telegraph journalist, door for a tweet she'd written a year ago. They need to stop doing all that nonsense.
Precisely.
But also there is an element where they say, well, there's so many crimes we can't send something to everyone. Most crimes are committed by repeat offenders.
Yes.
If you actually do investigate one of those crimes properly, for instance, the shoplifters in my local high street, they go, well, here's the guy, he's on video, he's outside the store, he's literally sitting there, we know his name, we've got him, everything. If you actually prosecuted and these people were behind bars, they wouldn't be committing all those crimes. Was it 100,000 people commit something like 50,000 of all of the crimes? 50% of all the crimes in this country. Why don't we just target those people?
Exactly. And when I was an elected councillor and I used to have regular contact with local police, the crime figures came out and suddenly there was a massive dip in antisocial behaviour and car crime in my area. So I raised it with them. I said, well, what's that for? Why is there a massive decrease? And they said,
they arrested Terry.
Yes, literally. Terry and Darren have gone to prison, and the crime stats went down for 6 months, and then they were back again.
Yeah, imagine. When that's that, we all know. We know. I think most ordinary, sensible people could go into a local police office, police station, and such they exist anymore, and say, let's prioritise. Also, police are still working pen and paper. When I had to give police statements, I'm literally like, no, you're not. I said, literally, no, you're not coming to my house. Take a police statement. Tell me the information you need in it. Right. I will then email you my statement. You then email me back a document that topped and tailed in the right, and then I can sign it as a witness, and I will scan it and send it back to you. So you are not spending stupid amount of time sitting with me when I write my statement. Also, I've had years ago a police statement about being a victim of crime. Someone like writing out in longhand, getting loads of it wrong, by the way, sending me a coming back with a typed statement which had so many factual errors. And by the way, that's why a lot of cases fall down, because actually your statement when used in court doesn't match what the police statement has been. They have got to get with, not even 21st century, 20th century technology would be a good start. Let's talk about 21st century and free trade, though, because it seems to be over these days. Donald Trump's tariffs. We had a deal, did we not, about a month ago?
So.
The Prime Minister, the President on a phone call, big love-in, and wasn't it great? And there's this deal on... and again, I've lost track of where we're supposed to be, but I thought we were on 10% tariffs. We were low 10% tariffs. We were going to go to 0 on certain things. We were going to do this little trade deal. And still not signed and sealed, apparently. Still not in effect. We were being facing 25% tariffs on steel and aluminium. Trump, the other day, and it came into force overnight, raised them unilaterally to 50%. But apparently, no, it is going to be 25%. We found out this morning. The steel industry found out this morning it's going to be 25%. You know, they literally lost a massive load of orders because it was high. Those orders get reinstated because they think the deal's being done. They then get cancelled because this 50% was coming in. They're going to be reinstated because this... But we still haven't got the 0% that was promised in the deal. This is a level of chaos that businesses cannot work with.
You can imagine if you were the chief exec of a steel company, you'd be under your desk rocking at the moment because you just don't know. There's no certainty in your business. How can you plan for the future when you don't know, even in 48 hours, what your tariffs are going to be and if those contracts are ever going to come to fruition? But didn't Keir Starmer have his football game watching interrupted by the phone call with Donald Trump and then absolutely nothing? So why hasn't that been signed? We've had long enough. Why can't we give certainty to our industry?
And it's not a big, far-reaching...
That's one thing.
But and also, crucially, and again, they had been in talks for a very long time beforehand, and the Tories had been in talks, hadn't they? Your thoughts on that? Very welcome. Also, particularly on the white British people to become a minority in the UK population within the next 40 years on current trajectories. That's what a new report from Professor Matt Goodwin says. Your reaction to that? 0344 499 1000. Welcome, of course, to give your thoughts on any of the big topics. Don't forget, coming up in this hour, we're going to be talking about Donald Trump attacking the BBC over their Gaza misreporting, because that's what it is. Basically, they consider Hamas, a terrorist organisation that they don't recognise as a terrorist organisation, to be a completely reliable source. When, I know this is going to come as a surprise to people, terrorists sometimes lie. I know. All that coming up next. This is Talk.
This is an issue where the Prime Minister and his cabinet, his senior politicians, should be talking to the people. We should be having a discussion about this, not some sort of petulant, we don't have blasphemy laws, and then just walking off.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pathetic. It's pathetic.
Well, he lacks the words to speak to people in difficult times, I think. Do you remember after the Southport killings, he turned up to lay a wreath, which was a responsible thing for him to do. But then when those people were sort of protesting on the margin of that and saying, what are you going to do about it, he just walked off. He didn't have the words to talk to them.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. Thank you so much for your company and indeed for your calls and your messages coming in particular about this new report about the white British population becoming a minority of the UK within the next 40 years on current trajectories. Yasmin has got in touch to say city by city it's already happening now. Isla points out I think it goes for all of Europe as well. Nigel says, again, could be Farage, we don't know. I'll probably be dead by then. Every cloud. Linda says this government and past ones are responsible for this decline in our nation, but is reform really the answer? Tessa says I'm scared for my grandchildren, both girls. Women are not respected by other religions like they are in Christian societies, and that has been a concern that has been raised. And certainly the young women I know, teens and in their 20s, lots of young women I know in this industry have been telling me that the harassment they get on the streets, particularly in London, very, very aggressive sexual harassment on the streets is coming almost entirely from men who speak with a foreign accent. Yeah, it is an issue in terms of something, you know, a lot of the people who are in charge, who are men, perhaps don't notice. I'm an old woman. I don't know about you. Doesn't happen to me. I'm not surprised. Let's go to the phone line. So Ricky is in London and wants to have his say. Good morning to you, Ricky.
Good morning, Julia. Good morning, Claire.
Oh, morning.
Oh, she loves it when she gets a hello as well. I ignore her too much. Ricky, what do you want to say, my darling?
Right, I think I've spoken to you before about this, and I've said to you that race matters. And the thing is, it's quite a taboo subject, and I think this is actually quite a historical moment in our country, because now we've reached a tipping point, and it's something that we're going to have to talk about.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and we're doing it now, and I'm hearing, if I were a lefty, I would be calling you all Nazis, but I know that you're not.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you say, I heard you say, oh, I'm quite relaxed about skin colour, it's not something that really bothers me. But the trouble is, that's all well and good, Julia. The trouble is, a lot of people that are not of our skin colour are not relaxed about it, and they're acting right now, especially with the likes of those with different cultures. You know, they want to take over. We're being overrun by people from backward medieval cultures and third world countries, and we are suffering for it. And I think, you know...
No, I think you're making a number of fair points there in terms of people, the number of people in this population, survey after survey, even by, you know, the like sort of Channel 4 and others, you know, right old lefties, showing, you know, the views that of, say, Muslim population of this country, even, you know, Muslims born British in this country, having a view that they would like Sharia law in place. They think that people who, you know, blaspheme against the religion should go to prison and things like that. Not sharing many of the views on homosexuality, perhaps those that we would have had in the 1950s as the wider British population, not sharing many of the standard views of British people.
Yeah, and you know, you remember, because you made a point about some, you know, there are Islamists and then there are your moderate Muslims. But let me run this by you. You remember the Gaza 5 MPs who got through on the Gaza ticket? Well, obviously they had to be voted in, Julia. So they weren't voted in by Islamist persons, right, were they? So you have to be fair and say that for that to happen, a lot of moderate Muslims would have had to put them in that position. So basically, these Islamists, although these moderate Muslims, you know, might not be like them, these Islamists, they're doing their bidding. And so let me...
And is it just Muslims and Islamic values that you object to, or are there other cultures that you also are concerned about?
We are seeing a lot of anti-white sentiment in this country. We are still the vast majority in this country, and look at the backlash that we are getting. When you look at the percentage of what we are, imagine the backlash. Imagine how we are going to be treated when, in 40 years' time, we are minority.
I tell you what, most of the anti-white sentiment in this country comes from lefty liberal white people who are so busy sort of self-flagellating. Oh, I'm terrible, I must be racist, I must be a terrible person because I'm white.
Yeah, but by then it will be too late. When you think about Keir Starmer and he talks about the Muslim vote supporting him, there'll come a point when their numbers will be so vast they will just cast him aside because he's had his use. Let me tell you something about white people, Julia. White people are good at things. White people had an empire. White people are responsible for the Industrial Revolution.
Europeans were.
Hang on. Yeah.
It wasn't because they were white.
White people are the gatekeepers of Western liberal culture. That's what white people are.
I think Europeans are. I think Europeans are getting, and then exporting that culture to North America, Australia, and elsewhere. I think it's a European. I think it's actually more down to Christianity and Protestantism, actually.
What's the common denominator? They're all of the same skin colour of us.
Yeah.
Let me run something.
Okay, very quickly, because I've got to get another call as well. Yep.
Let's look at your own show, talk show, right?
Yep.
Let me go all hands are useless for you, right? Okay, let me do this. Ian Collins, white.
Yeah.
Mike Graham, white.
Yes, a lot of white presenters, yes.
Jeremy Carl, white. Alex Phillips, white. Julia Hartley-Brewer, white. Claire Pissell, white. Now, that's not because Talk is racist. That's because Talk employs the best people for the job. White people are good at things, Julia.
No, I don't know. No, I don't know. I think the majority of people in this country who are and have perhaps in a position to do this kind of job actually, are white, because the majority of people in this country are white. That's what I think. I'm going to have to leave it there, Ricky. I think you made a lot of good points. I don't think it's down to being white. I think it's a European long-term Judeo-Christian culture. That's what I think it's down to. But again, that developed in Europe. There we are. Ricky, really appreciate that, though. Lots to think about there. Love to hear your response to what Ricky had to say. Dave is on the line. He's also in London. Good morning to you, Dave.
Hi, Julia. How are you?
Very well. What do you want to say?
Well, there's something white people and European people are not very good at, and that is having children.
Yep.
So we don't support the family. By the way, the average family size, contrary to popular belief, hasn't changed. It's still about 2.1.
Yeah.
What has changed is childless couples.
Yeah.
They've gone from about 14% in 2007 to nearly 50% now.
I think it's heartbreaking.
50%. Right, so this is unplanned childlessness. This is not women choosing not to have children. 10% choose not to, 10% can't for medical reasons. 80% it's unplanned childlessness.
Yeah.
Why?
They started too late.
Culture and European culture puts women's careers now ahead of having a family. So guess what? You run out of time. Fertility rates fall. I think if you're 30 and a woman, you only have a 50 to 50 chance to have a child.
50. That's the stat is that 50% of women who don't have a child at 30 will never have a child. Given that something like 90% of women want to have a child, that is devastating.
So that's what we're not good at. And reform sort of the right track to talk about the family. What they're not on the right track for is the child cap, because this is not an issue around why people aren't having more children. This is an issue as why aren't people becoming parents.
Yeah,
so I think one
of the biggest single things would be housing, student debt, and housing. I know so many young people go, well, we're not ready. We want to get settled. We want to buy our own home and get married and then have kids. But by the time they can do that, basically your eggs are all gone. I am evangelical about this. 30 is your last chance to start trying to have kids, ladies. It is that simple. Take it as a mum who has one child and would have loved to have had more. There is a reason why so many women I know in my cohort just have one child, and it wasn't necessarily through choice. Claire Pearsall nodding as well. Dave, really interesting points. Thank you very much. I mean, that's the thing. A lot of these trajectories, it's not just a number of people coming into this country from different cultural and race backgrounds. It is actually the homegrown cohort don't have babies. Mind you, neither the Japanese and South Korean absolute collapse in their birth rates too.
Well, they do, and they had that arbitrary cap put on the amount of children they could have as well.
Well, China did.
But I think that spilled over. But I think that we aren't very good at encouraging people to have families. We are not very good at things like intergenerational living, looking after our older parents. We don't want them to come and live with us. I'm sorry, that's a really blunt thing.
No, we really don't. No, women used to be carers for their in-laws and their own parents.
Exactly.
They're busy paying half the mortgage and half the rent right now. That's why they don't look. It's not people being selfish. They're doing what they have to do. Anyway, lots more coming up, including Jake Wallace-Simons on Trump and his press secretary attacking the BBC for their, let's face it, lying, misreporting. Yeah, I'm going to use the word lying about what's going on in Gaza between the IDF and Hamas. First up, though, we're giving you the chance to win FIFA Club World Cup final tickets, thanks to our friends at DAZN. Here's everything that you need to know.
Hello, look who it is, it's me, Andy Goldstein. And here at TalkSport, we're gearing up for the Club World Cup in the United States. And to celebrate, we've got 2 tickets to the final in New York on July the 13th to give away. We're going to sort out the flights, we're going to sort out the accommodation, and we're going to give you £5,000 spending money to spend however you want. How about that?
18 plus, UK excluding Northern Ireland. For a chance to win, all you have to do to enter is text the word football to 83338. Do that by the 13th of June at 11 p.m, and that's it, you're done, you're in the draw. A text will cost £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. You must have bill payer's permission, or you can just send your name and number by post to Club World Cup Final Prize Draw, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, and it must arrive by 5 p.m. on the 18th of June.
This is a TalkSport limited competition run on TalkSport Talk and Virgin Radio UK stations. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
Do not miss out on that incredible giveaway, thanks to our friends over at DAZN. Good luck with that. We'll take a quick break. Up next, back with Jake Wallace-Simons. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. 11:37 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Claire Pearsall still with me. Let's talk about the BBC. It's never a good thing when we're talking about the BBC, is it? Even though Gary Lineker has left. No, it is still an organisation that is, I mean, let's face it, institutionally anti-Semitic, because that's the only explanation really for why BBC presenters, reporters, producers, editors seem to take the word of the Hamas terrorists as gospel every single time they claim anything or report anything, over and above the evidence before their eyes and ears, and indeed what they are told by the democratic elected Israeli government. I think we should be questioning everything that we are told in any war by anybody, but particularly when the terrorists tell us one thing. Well, let's talk about this right now with Jake Wallace-Simons, who's author of Israelophobia, the newest version of the oldest hatred, and what to do about it. Very good morning to you, Jake.
Good morning.
This story is particularly in the news, and I do want you to help explain what the different sides have claimed in just a couple of moments. But this is particularly over food distribution, aid distribution in Gaza, carried out by a charity sort of basically funded and organised, set up by the Israelis, against the advice, the agreement of the UN and everyone else. And claims from Hamas, because any claim coming out of the Gaza Strip is always something authorised by Hamas. You can't get your information out otherwise, in which they have claimed that IDF soldiers opened fire on civilians going to aid and basically, a massacre or two. Who knows how many they've claimed so far. Let's have a little watch and a listen to what Caroline Leavitt, who is, of course, the White House press secretary for the US President Donald Trump, had to say yesterday when she was asked at the White House by a reporter about Israeli forces firing on Palestinians trying to get aid from the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. The Red Cross and others were reported to have said that up to 20 people had arrived at a hospital with gunshot wounds. And she asked what was being done to address this situation. And this is what the press secretary had to say.
The administration is aware of those reports, and we are currently looking into the veracity of them because, unfortunately, unlike some in the media, we don't take the word of Hamas with total truth. We like to look into it when they speak. Unlike the BBC, who had multiple headlines. They wrote, Israeli tank kills 26, Israeli tank kills 21, Israeli gunfire kills 31, Red Cross says 21 people were killed in an aid incident, and then, oh wait, they had to correct and take down their entire story, saying we reviewed the footage and couldn't find any evidence.
It's very, very clear that this was something that Caroline Leavitt was planning to say. But Jake Wallace-Simons, take us back a little bit to these initial claims and counterclaims and where we stand and what the BBC has actually said and done.
Well, from the BBC's point of view, they've just been reporting a breaking news story as they see it. Initially, the claims came out saying that an Israeli tank had killed more than 30 people. And then as more details began to emerge, that figure was downgraded. It became murky. There was a variety of conflicting sources, local sources on the ground, which read Hamas. The Red Cross got involved. And in the end, it turned out that Israel hadn't massacred anybody at all. And it was a bit of a debacle. But I think that the thing is, from the BBC's point of view, they're doing their best. They're just dealing with the information that's coming to them. But the problem is they're in the habit of taking information that comes from disreputable sources seriously. There was research that was done by Andrew Fox at the Henry Jackson Society. I know he's one of your guests, regular guests here, a few months ago, which showed that only 5% of broadcasters actually cite Israeli figures. Yeah. 95% do not cite any Israeli figures at all. And that's really key, because if you're going to be believing Hamas, and of course that's very problematic in itself, but let's say you do, you also do need to be believing our democratic ally Israel. Now, of course, Israel takes a bit more time with its figures because it actually goes through the evidence and tries to get you something that's accurate rather than just pulling a figure out of the air. I mean, the fact that people believe that Hamas can come out with a figure of 31 people dead within 5 minutes.
I'm always stunned by that. I mean, we have events that happen here, and even with all our CCTV and rule of law and order, it takes. I mean, we didn't know how many had been injured in the Liverpool incident for days.
And nobody asks the obvious questions. That's the thing. I mean, with the Iraq war, we still don't know how many people were killed. The estimates vary within a couple of 100,000. And yet there's a strike in Gaza. There's chaos, there's war, there's blood, there's dust, there's panic. And suddenly, 31 people exactly. And no one asks why that could be the case. And so you end up with the BBC, it's not that they're lying, but they're believing liars and they're projecting it to the world. And that's where all this comes from.
And it's particularly dangerous when the BBC does it because it is such a trusted news source around the world, and in particular in the Middle East. And people can cite, well, the BBC is saying it. And they've done this again and again. And what's interesting, they've done it again and again, despite often being shown that the information, proven that the information they've had is actually untrue. Go all the way back to the start when we had a claim again from doctors and others and humanitarian sources that there had been a strike, an Israeli strike on a hospital, and it turned out there wasn't a strike on a hospital. It was a hospital car park, but also that it wasn't from an Israeli missile. It was actually it looks like it was Hamas missiles that had misfired and come down. The figures are often given are very questionable. There have been plenty of videos that have come out. Again, you don't see this on the BBC or Sky or ITV, but BBC BBC is the worst offender. We have to pay for it after all. Where numerous claims have been debunked. There are videos where they literally film propaganda videos, right? Literally action. Watching people running forward and claiming, they're fleeing protesters. I mean, in this particular case, there are lots of different videos. There is a video that's done the rounds claiming that, well, look, here are Hamas fighters opening fire on people. The BBC and other organisations say they debunked that and said this wasn't from near this aid distribution site in Rafah. But then the actual aid organisation themselves, this is what are they called? The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. That they released footage, from cameras for over a 15-minute period at the time when we were told there had been this attack by IDF soldiers, showing no issue whatsoever, no gunfire, people queuing up in fairly orderly fashion to get their aid. That should have debunked those claims, shouldn't it? And yet, I don't think most people even know about that video.
No, because the BBC ignored it. They didn't bother.
They didn't say either, well, look, this side are claiming this, but this side is claiming this, with this evidence.
Yes, exactly. And the problem is that I think with the BBC, it's not they're trying to lie. They've got confirmation bias, that in their minds, Israel is the bad guys carrying out a genocide, although they're not allowed to say that because it's not, but that's how they feel. And Hamas are the resistance. Again, they're not allowed to say it, but that's how they tend to feel. Yep. And so that confirmation bias, even if they're trying to be impartial, just comes through all the time. Whenever they make a mistake, it always falls in one direction and not in the other. But at the moment, I think it's important that people know this. We're in a propaganda tornado at the moment, coming from the other side, if I may say, call it that, which I think I should. And the reason is that Israel is close to winning. And the reason it's close to winning is that it's tackling the issue of aid. All of this propaganda is attracted to the issue of aid. And the reason is that until now, the UN has been bringing in the aid. Hamas... the UN is compromised by Hamas. Many of the UN, 1,200 of them, actually are members of Hamas or Islamic Jihad. Hamas takes the aid from the UN and then sells it, not gives it. It was given to them, but they sell it to the Palestinians, making money to pay their terrorist army. What's happening now is that Israel is saying, no more of this. We're giving the aid ourselves with the Americans for free. Gazans were filmed being astonished that actually we're getting it for free now. And Hamas has no longer got the money to pay its fighters or to maintain its control. And Hamas is panicking. That's why you're seeing demonstrations in Gaza against Hamas. That's why you're seeing armed groups now in Rafah in the south coming out against Hamas. They published a joint statement, some local families and clans, just earlier today, saying they were going to be standing against Hamas because Hamas is weakening its grip. And the reason is that Israel is cutting off its aid as well as pursuing it militarily. And that's why this propaganda effort is an overdrive to stop that happening from the UN and from Hamas.
And that's interesting because as soon as Israel said they didn't want, there was aid coming in, they wanted to be basically in control of it themselves. Their criticisms were, thick and fast from aid organisations and from, all the usual suspects at UN and indeed our own government. I say with great shame that this is our government and the stance they're taking. This idea, but aid shouldn't be based on the war aims of getting people south. These aid distribution centres are in the south, not in the north where lots of people are. But the whole point is they do want people to move to the south. But it's not the job of a nation that has been attacked that they have to feed the opposing population. They are effectively at war with the country of Gaza, but they're offering to feed those people. I don't remember us offering to feed any of the people when we've been at war with them. But here's the thing. I put out a tweet the other day, and it was fascinating how many people didn't get the purpose of my tweet, but hey, that's Twitter for you. What would be the motive for Israeli troops to fire on innocent civilians coming to get aid from food hubs, basically where they've been criticised providing these food hubs? There would be no motive that I could see for the Israelis to do that, although they have said some soldiers opened fire, warning shots to people who approached them, refused to move away. Yeah. Whether they had arms or not, that's clearly a threat to IDF soldiers. That would be normal form in warfare. But there is a clear motive for Hamas, as you say, to make those claims. And so many of the claims don't match with each other. Doctors saying it was gunshot wounds, but the initial claim saying it was a tank firing. Well, which was it?
Exactly. People just aren't asking the obvious questions. I mean, really, why would Israel go to all the effort of providing aid to Gazan civilians only to shoot them when they arrive to pick
and
the aid
they
up?
know the bad publicity they'll get.
Just skip the aid bit and shoot them if that's what you really want to do. If you want to do genocide, just do the genocide. Don't bother feeding these people and trying to evacuate them before attacks.
Jeremy Bowen on the BBC the other day said, look, but the key thing is we have to rely on sources within the Gaza Strip because Israel will not allow independent journalists to enter the Gaza Strip. And he actually said some words along to this effect, something like, and the only reason I can think they would do that is they don't want us to see what's going on. That's the only motive. Why aren't journalists allowed in the Gaza Strip?
Well, I mean, journalists in previous conflicts in Gaza have been allowed into the Gaza Strip, and immediately they've been provided with a minder by Hamas, steered to propaganda. I mean, you think the propaganda now is bad. With journalists there working hand in hand with Hamas on the ground, it becomes even worse. They're taken to see, quote-unquote, civilian disasters and massacres and never see any Hamas fighters killed or wounded and so on and so forth. We've seen that over the years again and again. In fact, in 2014, there was an interesting, I don't know if you remember this, there was an interesting moment when an Indian film crew in Gaza during the conflict there happened to see a Hamas fighter shooting a rocket from just outside the hotel, which normally they weren't allowed to see. Hamas wouldn't let any journalists film that. They filmed it through the window, broadcast it, and it took the world by storm because nobody had ever seen Hamas fighting before. And so, that's the sort of coverage we would be getting from the Strip if journalists were allowed in. And of course, Israel doesn't want to kill any journalists. Now, look, personally, I think journalists should be allowed in. I would quite like to go in and do some coverage myself, and I would like that to be the case. But I can understand why Israel feels, you know what, we're going to be screwed either way, whether we let you in or whether we don't. So why don't we just keep it this way?
I'm sure you'd be taken hostage very, very quickly. That's the only other worry as well. Jake Willis-Simons, thank you so much. You've been such an important figure in covering all of this. I really appreciate you joining us. A quick word from Claire Pearsall on this.
I'd be really interested if Jake went in and managed to do some reporting from there.
I'd be worried for his safety.
Oh, I would be worried for his safety. I'd also like to go there and see what it's like because I think it's really, really important to get past this propaganda.
Yeah, and again, I do think there are concerns over from the Israelis that you wouldn't get past the propaganda and then they'd have more people to worry about there.
Yeah.
Again, it just seems to me it's the idea that you would take the word of a terrorist organisation that kills and mutilates and rapes and murders and holds hostages.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I think one should always question what the Israeli government says. I question what the British government, the American government says. And by the way, the White House press secretaries haven't got a very strong record on being, should we say, uneconomical with the truth. So, I mean, we should always question everything everyone says. Yeah. But when you are refusing to believe it or report anything the Israeli government says, a democratic elected government that is held accountable by its own partner, held accountable by its own people are out to protest and not be shot at in Israel. Small point worth making, but you are saying, well, if Hamas say it, well, it's the health ministry. And by the way, the doctors there, you don't get to be a doctor in Gaza. You don't get to speak to the media in Gaza and have that be broadcast unless you are saying what Hamas want you to say. You will not be there otherwise. So we've got to stop taking these people as, again, telling us the gospel truth. It is just propaganda. And frankly, the British media are falling for it. BBC, shame on you. No, you don't get a single penny more in your licence fee. 11:51 is the time. We'll take a quick break. We're going to be talking about policing cuts. Will police have to start, deciding which crimes they do and don't investigate? And aren't they already doing that? This is Talk.
the European Union and India, right? Now, it turns out at least one of those deals with the United States is not a deal.
Yeah.
So why would they put out a video saying this is what we've done?
Exactly, and it's becoming a systemic problem because it's whether it's on trade deals and the economy to try and say that they've got a deal when they clearly haven't, whether it's about saying they're stopping the boats and the numbers are coming down, whether those numbers are actually backdated, maybe that they've inherited from a previous government, or whether it's about NHS waiting times, whether it's about investment in public, whatever it is.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. 11:54 is the time. Coming up after midday, we'll be taking a little bit of PMQs live. The clashes between Keir Starmer and the opposition, Kemi Badenoch. See what other questions come. There's lots of talk, by the way, of some sort of walkout by Gaza supporting MPs. So, you know, usual suspects, Jeremy Corbyn et al. We're going to see what happens there. Coming up right now, though, let's talk about police cuts. Once again, we've got the spending review from the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, next week, and we've had an open letter to the Prime Minister, her boss, about that spending review from a load of senior police officers, including the head of the Metropolitan Police, Sir Mark Rowley, basically saying that if they do face cuts, they're going to face stark choices about which crimes they investigate and which they don't, because they simply won't have the money. But will that really make a difference? They're not investigating half the crimes that happen anyway, are they? Let's talk to David Shipley. He's a former prisoner himself and a writer and researcher on prison and justice issues. Good morning to you once again, David.
Hi, Julia.
Thanks for joining us. I mean, it's a very stark warning, and we know the Home Office bore a brunt of the, and the Justice Department, a brunt of the cuts under the austerity years under Cameron and Osborne. They're still kind of wrestling with that, but are we looking at more cuts, and would that make a difference given how few crimes properly get investigated and prosecuted now?
Well, I think that's the key issue. You might be astonished to hear how few crimes result in a charge these days. Well, perhaps not. Yeah. So when they first started publishing the crime outcome statistics nationally about a decade ago, around 17% of crimes resulted in a charge, and now it's less than 6%. So
I'm amazed it's as high as 6% overall. No, I'm serious, because in lots of things like bag thefts, burglaries, rapes and things, you're looking at 3%.
Yeah. Yes, a lot of offences are much lower than that. And the issue, of course, is that not every charge results in a conviction. I think about 1% of crimes result in someone going to prison. So the police are already not really solving crime. Yeah. Only about 5.5% of crimes result in a charge. That means for 95% of offenders, each crime, they've got a good chance of getting away with it.
And often people are told, and we've had an absurd situation. We had one constabulary that basically said we only investigate burglaries in houses with an odd number, not an even number. I mean, it was that madness level of not bothering to investigate. But often people are told again and again, I've had this before, we don't have any evidence for making, for pursuing this. But actually they don't seek out the evidence, and when I've provided the evidence, often you still have to push to have a crime investigated. We've certainly seen that with shoplifting, with phone thefts, bike thefts. I know people who've literally got the number plate of the van where this bike's been put in, but a bunch of guys didn't want to tackle it, felt too afraid to tackle it himself given the number of people involved. Police don't want to do anything about it.
It does seem like that, doesn't it? And I think maybe some of these crimes are a bit too much effort. It almost feels like, they're very quick to arrest people who tweet the wrong thing or publish the wrong thing. But this basic police work of finding thieves, even when the information's there about where something is, lots of people have their phones stolen, can see where it is on the tracking software. But the police won't do anything about it. And I think this is a real problem.
Isn't that easy police work? That's the bit I don't get. That's easy police work.
You would think so. I suppose that part of this is reflective of the same thing that Robert Jenrick was talking about last week with people fare jumping on the tube. Confronting potentially violent, potentially dangerous criminals, who are prepared to steal on the street is probably more risky than, for example, going around to the house of someone who's written an offensive tweet. But
it is their job. I mean, look, you've been in prison. You know, how many people are repeat offenders? People say, oh, you know, the reoffending rate after prison. Well, yeah, that's because these people have been caught for their 100th offence. They may have been prosecuted and convicted of maybe 5 or 10, but they've committed plenty more than that. The vast majority of these people are repeat offenders. They're habitual criminals.
Yeah, absolutely. And a large proportion of crime is committed by a very small percentage of criminals.
Why don't they just tackle those people and then put them away, and then they'll have fewer crimes to deal with? I mean, it doesn't seem to be brain surgery, this.
No, I mean, I completely agree. I think what we have in this country now, though, is something that's called a narco-tyranny, which is where if you're law-abiding, you get the state bearing down on you in all sorts of ways, in regulation, in things that stop you living your life. But actually, the state is at the same time not doing the basics of keeping us safe. Low-level violence and disorder is allowed to run rampant. Just yesterday, this awful story of this pensioner, Robert Price, who was killed in his home by 3 teenagers who threw fireworks into his house and set fire to it at the end of a campaign of
exactly. I mean, and people are having to live like that. I'm so sorry time is against us. I know we'll speak to you again very soon, David Shipley. Your wealth of experience is so useful to us. But again, I think a lot of people just find this all utterly perplexing, don't we? Coming up, we're going to get PMQs after the news. This is Talk, Home and Common Sense.
Springtime, the focus.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good afternoon to you. Welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. Whether you're listening on DAB+ radio, on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube, or your connected device, great to have your company. Claire Pearsall also still joining me. She's a former Conservative government advisor in the Home Office. Also going to be joined in a few minutes by Paul Richards, who's a former Labour special advisor, to give their thoughts on opening exchanges at PMQs. That's just started over in the Commons, and we've got, I think it's congressional already going, but we're going to talk you through the exchange we get between the Prime Minister and Kemi Badenoch, see what she decides to question him on. We'll give our thoughts on that. We're also going to be talking to the Ukrainian MP and friend of the show, Kira Ruddick, who I'm delighted to say will be in the studio about the latest in Ukraine, particularly those audacious attacks by the Ukrainians on Russian jets and indeed on that bridge to Crimea. We're also going to be talking about the usual madness of net zero. And is there a possibility, it looks like it, the Energy Secretary, Net Zero Secretary, whatever he is this week, Ed Miliband, poised to ditch the government's insane targets to fit useless overpriced heat pumps. That's all coming up. Right now, though, let's go to the House of Commons live to hear PMQs.
The winter fuel policy was set in stone. 2 weeks ago, the Prime Minister U-turned. Today, the Chancellor is rushing her plans because she just realised when winter is. So on behalf of the pensioners who want to know, can the Prime Minister be clear with us here and now? How many of the 10 million people who lost their winter fuel payments will get it back?
Prime Minister. Well, I'm glad to see she's catching up with what happened 2 weeks ago. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, at the budget, we took the right decision to stabilise the economy because of the £22 billion black hole that they left. And the signs, we took the right decisions. The growth figures are up, the interest rates have been cut, and we got 3 trade deals. So we will look again, as I said 2 weeks ago, at the eligibility for winter fuel, and of course we'll set out how we pay for it. But because we've stabilised the economy, Mr. Speaker, we on this side are committed to the triple lock, and that increased pensions by over £400 this April. On their side, they say the triple lock is unsustainable, and I think her position is she wants to means test it.
No answer. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister clearly has selective amnesia. I asked him 3 questions about the winter fuel payments 2 weeks ago, and he was floundering. The fact is, he hasn't answered the question I asked him. He hasn't answered the question I asked him. He can't tell us who will get the payments. All we see is U-turn after U-turn. His head must be spinning. Will he apologise now for taking the payments away in the first place, including to his own backbenchers? And can he tell us how he's going to pay for this?
Well, Mr. Speaker, we took the right decisions at the budget because we needed to stabilise the economy. She needs to apologise for the fact that they left the economy in a terrible state. With a mini-budget which blew up the economy, and we were left with a £22 billion black hole. When she gets up, perhaps she should apologise for that.
Mr. Speaker, the OBR has said there was no such black hole. He's just given away £30 billion for the Chagos Island. That's his black hole. He hasn't stabilised the economy. Borrowing prices are higher now than any time in the last Parliament. He has not stabilised the economy. He has no clear answers on what he's doing. It's just chaos, chaos, chaos. He keeps making announcements with no detail. So let's move to another area of confusion. Can we get a simple answer? Will the government keep the 2-child benefit cap?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I'm absolutely determined that we will drive down child poverty. That's one of the proudest things of the last Labour government. That's why we've got a task force. That's why we've got a strategy, and we'll set out that strategy in due course. But we drive child poverty down. Under them, poverty always goes up.
I didn't ask him about a task force. I asked him if he will keep the 2-child benefit cap, and he doesn't know. It's just chaos and uncertainty. He has no details. He is briefing something and causing a lot of confusion to the people out there. But on that 2-child benefit cap, Mr. Speaker, I'll tell him this. I believe in family, but I also believe in fairness. Yes. On this side of the House, we believe that people on benefits should have to make the same choices on having children as everyone else. Yes. What does the Prime Minister believe?
Yes. Prime Minister. Speaker, I believe profoundly in driving down poverty and child poverty. That's why we'll put a strategy in place. But she talks about head spinning. There's only one leader, Mr. Speaker, who's been praised this week by the Russian embassy. And if she carries on echoing Kremlin talking points like this, Reform are going to be sending her an application form for membership.
Mr. Speaker, I asked the Prime Minister what he believes in. He had to look in his folder to find the answer. His MPs behind him know what they believe in. He doesn't know.
Keep going.
Mr. Speaker, he has been in government for nearly a year. It's only going to get harder. Yes. He's been in government only a year. It's only going to get harder and harder. The canned forced laughter, the planted questions, all of this is going to disappear because at every single point, At every single point, things are getting worse. He has to ask Morgan McSweeney what it is that he believes in, but the fact is the chaos is being felt in the economy. The Chancellor said she would not be coming back with new tax rises, but she will have to pay for all of these U-turns which she's announcing out there, isn't she?
Yeah, Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to look in my folder because here I've got the quote that she had on Sky News. I will read it, thank you. It's what the Leader of the Opposition says. It's worth listening to. What she said was this: Sky News, Mr. Speaker, Israel is fighting a proxy war on behalf of the United Kingdom, just like Ukraine is on behalf of Western Europe against Russia. Well, that was certainly noticed in the Russian embassy, because they put out a statement saying the Leader of the Opposition has finally called a spade a spade. Ukraine is indeed fighting a proxy war against Russia on behalf of Western interests. And they went on to say the illegitimate Kyiv regime, created, financed and armed by the West, has been at it since 2014. So they endorsed that. They want the detail. I've given the quote. That's what Russia said in response. She asked me what I believe in. I believe in standing by Ukraine and calling out Russia as the aggressor.
Mr. Speaker, it was our government that stood behind Ukraine and led the way in Europe. Everything he has said this afternoon is total nonsense. Obfuscation, avoiding the question. He doesn't have any answers. It's disgraceful. I asked him, Mr. Speaker, about the two-child benefit cap. He's talking about the Kremlin. He's saying everything he can to distract from the mess he is making of our economy. The OECD has downgraded growth for the next 2 years. He can't rule out tax rises. The police chiefs are saying they don't have the money they need to keep the public safe. Just as he's releasing more criminals onto the streets. His cabinet are squabbling with each other. They've said that they've lost control of the borders, but he still managed, Mr. Speaker, to find £30 billion to give away the Chagos Islands. This is total and utter chaos. 2 weeks ago, he was crowing about his historic trade deal and how he got 0% tariffs on steel. Now the steel industry will face 25% tariffs unless he does exactly what President Trump tells him to. It is chaos, chaos, chaos. And isn't the root of the chaos, Mr. Speaker, that it is about this Prime Minister, his decisions and his judgment?
The only advice, Mr. Speaker, she gets up on a Wednesday morning, scrolls through social media, never does anything. We're the only country in the world that isn't paying the 50% tax on steel. And we're working in the US, and that will be coming down. We are working on it to bring it down to zero. That is going to happen.
Order. Please. Let's listen to the answer, even if you don't believe you're getting one. It is how the Prime Minister wishes to.
What did she opposes the US deal, she opposes the India deal, she opposes what we're doing with the EU, and she opposes Diego Garcia. That's a vital intelligence and strategic capability. Absolutely clear that legal uncertainty would compromise that capability in a very short time. No responsible Prime Minister would ever let that happen. We have secured the long-term basis for the base. That has been welcomed by Mr. Speaker, welcomed by the US, NATO, Australia, New Zealand, India. They're our allies. It's been opposed by our adversaries, Russia, China and Iran. And into that column we have reform, presumably following Putin, and the Tories following reform.
Right, well, let's come back after that rip-roaring exchange between Keir Starmer and Kemi Badenoch. I've said this many times before, and I'll say it again. There is no love lost between those two people, is there? Wow. Claire Pistol's still with me, former Conservative Government Advisor, listening to those 6 questions and 6... I mean, let's be honest, non-answers. 'Twas ever thus at PMQs. Also still joining us today on the line is Paul Richards. He's a former Labour Special Advisor. A very good afternoon to you, Paul.
Hello there. How are you?
Thank you for joining us. Well, I mean, they both They both gave it some today, didn't they? I thought that was quite interesting. I think Claire and I had the same reaction at the first question when the Kemi Badenoch asked about the winter fuel allowance. Massive issue, huge cut-to issue for voters, affects 10 million pensioners, and asking how many of those 10 million are going who lost winter fuel payments under the last announcement last year, and how many are going to get it back, as has been hinted at by the Prime Minister. And that did the Prime Minister gave, Paul, when he said she's catching up, glad to see she's catching up with what happened 2 weeks ago. Quite a big dig. Now, she hit back pointing out, no, I have asked you about this before in the last couple of weeks, but it's interesting, that sort of scathing response from him, but it echoes a lot of criticism that a lot of people have had of Kemi Badenoch's sort of questioning of the Prime Minister, doesn't it?
It does, but I think that she did really well this week, actually. I think she gave as good as she got. And I think that what you saw being played out was two sets of scripted, responses, both battling for social media attention, not necessarily sort of debating in a parliamentary style, but actually just...
We didn't learn anything.
No, so chaos from Kemi, and then from Keir, it was all about the black hole, the Liz Truss budget, and then this bizarre thing about Ukraine, which I'm sure we'll come on to, but that sort of came out of nowhere, that he had this quote from Sky News that Kemi had given succor to the Russians.
By stating, Israel is fighting a proxy war on behalf of the UK. And it's just as Ukraine is fighting a proxy war against Russia. I mean, yeah, it's true, isn't it? I mean, they're defending themselves in Ukraine, but yeah, on behalf of the West. I mean, this has been stated...
clumsy wording from Kemi, which then the Russians leapt upon, and then what Starmer has done is turn that back on her. But she hadn't asked about Ukraine. She was talking about two child benefit cap and talking about winter fuel allowance and so on. So it'll be interesting to see. Of course, Number 10 will now be pumping out that Ukraine line because, as Kemi said, it was just pure distraction, but it actually will now play on social media.
Yeah, and although again, with a certain group of people on perhaps on social media, but perhaps not for most people who won't query that. Claire Pearsall, let's say you and I both had that same reaction there. But she was, look, I agree with Paul. I think she had a very, very good PMQs. She came in very hard. He was so blatantly, openly not replying to questions. Now people say, "Oh, you never get any answers." You never do. I used to sit opposite the Prime Minister. My little spot in the press gallery was opposite the Prime Minister, just above it, when I was at the Sunday Express. And it was ever thus. Tony Blair, everyone else onwards. It's been like that. But he is so blatant about it, isn't he? About I'm not answering. Do you think there comes a point when the Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle or any Speaker, needs to actually say to a Prime Minister, "Sorry, that wasn't an answer to the question you were asked"?
But that really isn't the job for the chair to do that, unfortunately. This is a job now for MPs and constituents to write in and go, hold on a second, we want answers.
We get to judge the Prime Minister for failing to answer that question,
absolutely.
For obfuscating. Great parliamentary word, obfuscating.
It is.
Dodging the question.
Dodging the question.
Why doesn't he know how many... Why doesn't he know how many of the 10 million pensioners are going to get it back? Why doesn't he know whether or not he's going to overturn the cap on two-child benefit cap? Why doesn't he know any of these things?
Well, hang on, he does know, doesn't he? But he can't say it out loud in parliamentary questions because there's a spending review coming out next week. So that's why Kemi came on all those areas to make him look weak. And that's right, isn't it, Claire? That's how you would have advised them.
Well, yes, it would. And yes, he did look weak, though, because he hasn't answered. He can't even give a half answer when it comes to it. When you watch the likes of Tony Blair, when you watch the likes of David Cameron, and even some respects Michael Howard, you can not give an answer in a certain way that looks like you're giving an answer.
And they're all sort of loyally, you think, well, that's the thing, coming back to you, Paul, it is the better answer there from the Prime Minister would have been, look, we're looking into this. We want to help as many people as possible. We've got the spending review. I can't preempt that because we're doing the numbers. We have to be able to afford it. And and his usual claim, the economy has turned a corner. It absolutely sodding well hasn't, but he can keep claiming that. That's why we're able to give some of that money back. I don't think that's going to pass muster. I don't think, to be honest with you, that the people who lost it or people whose family members have lost it are going to forgive them for that. I think they lost a lot of people's support on that. But to say, but we'll hopefully be able to give you that information next week, because a lot of people are saying they're not expecting to have to wait all the way to the autumn budget because politically it won't last that long, will it? But wouldn't that have been a better answer from him?
Well, I think he could have just, hid behind the process and said, you have to wait and see because my honourable friend, the Chancellor, will be making announcements next week and yada, yada. He chose not to, but I think that would have been the stronger answer. It's interesting also, though, we had a massive defence review this week and we've had a load of announcements this morning on transport, and neither of those multi-billion pound announcements even came up in PMQs just now.
Well, they may have come up from some of the questions from MPs, I'm assuming.
Well, the planted questions.
Some planted questions. And that was the point. I mean, and we've had this with every party, have we not? Canned forced laughter, said Kemi Badenoch, and planted questions. We're told there's supposed to be some sort of walkout stage, either late in the afternoon or possibly in PMQs, by sort of pro-Gaza MPs. We've got 5 pretty much official Gaza MPs, have we not?
But they can walk out and stay out, as far as I'm concerned.
There is that. But Claire, I mean, is Kemi Badenoch asking the questions that really matter about, again, winter fuel payments very important. But a lot of people, Labour voters too, very much opposed to having that cap on two-child benefit lifted. That's a metropolitan elite sort of charity sort of concern. Actually, your average working class person living in a housing estate next door to somebody who doesn't work and has got 4 kids when they can't afford to have more than 2 kids, frankly, they feel rather differently about it. But is she going down the right line? Is this the line of attack that you think is working?
I think today she has chosen the right line of attack. And yes, there has been all of the defence spending announcements, but there was also a statement in the House of Commons on Monday and hours of debate afterwards. So they've had that. So I think to keep rehashing it would be wrong. The transport numbers, which would be interesting, the spending on transport.
But on defence, of course. Kemi Badenoch doesn't disagree.
No.
And the argument, surely the argument back, Paul, from Labour would be, well, if you're criticising us for not spending enough on defence, A, where would you get the money from? And B, why didn't you spend more when you were in power? So that's one of the issues with the Tories and Labour now. Tories spent years blaming Labour for the mess that the economy was in when they took over. Labour is spending ages, and will do for years, blaming the Tories. And we don't seem to get anywhere. I know we've got a question. The new Reform MP, Sarah Pouchin, has got a question, and we'll bring that to you if we can get it during our time. But, a lot of voters are going to get very, very, very bored with, it's all your fault from both sides.
Well, there's only so long you can do that as well, of course, because ultimately governments will be judged on their own performance, which is why I'm surprised. I can understand why Kemi didn't raise defence and transport, but I'm surprised Starmer didn't. I thought he would be in his advantage to echo some of that. Notwithstanding Claire's point about the very long debate they had on defence, but people aren't really paying attention to that in quite the same way as PMQs. Yeah. So I would have, if I was advising, I would say raise these big issues, because the Labour government is spending a lot of money in the north, and you can say that's just to see off reform, or it's genuinely needed for the economy, or whatever the argument is, but it should have been raised.
Yeah. I've got no problem with government spending money to be popular. This in the right areas. We know there's only £15 billion of transport projects announced for largely, not entirely, but largely North and Midlands for some of our major cities. Absolutely vital for people to be able to get to and from work, to start businesses. Transport links outside London are abysmal in this country, and it has a massive impact on productivity, on people's ability to even get a job. Bus links, again, much more absolutely ignored largely by the metropolitan elite down in London, because they all get the tube or cycle to work, and they don't understand how most people have to need a car to get about. And if you haven't got a car, you literally can't go and get a job because you can't get there because there are only 2 buses a day from your village. So these are really important issues. I would have thought more voters will actually be impacted by that announcement today than pretty much anything else discussed at PMQs.
Yeah, you sound like a Labour MP, Julia.
But I do think there's a problem. There's a problem with that, because the announcement was only made this morning. And yes, you're right. We need to make good the transport situation in the north and make those people feel that they're being listened to and they'll be able to get about their lives. But it doesn't impact people immediately, not the way that things like welfare changes or winter fuel allowance
literally less money in your pocket today.
Exactly. Whereas this is a longer term ambition.
There's no doubt also, Paul, just to come to you finally, finally on this is that Kemi Badenoch, in one of her final question, I think her final question, talked about, chaos is where we are. The root of that is the Prime Minister's decisions, the Prime Minister's judgment. At the end of the day, Rachel Reeves doesn't make the decisions. He's the First Lord of the Treasury. He gets to have the final say on anything that they do, the budget and the spending review. But also talking about how, you're just 1 year in, it's going to get harder. He's already seeing a lot of support. Well, we've seen it in the polls, leeching away. Even among many of his MPs, there's a lot of griping. This is not where you'd expect him to be less than a year into office with that massive majority. I was working in the political journalist in the Commons when Tony Blair was in power at this time. And this was nothing like that. Do you see his power and his authority leeching away?
Well, I don't know about that. I think he's having a rocky...
Paul, I'm going to interrupt you. We're going to go live to the Commons to hear Sarah Pouchin. Back to you in a moment.
Will he, in the interests of public safety, follow the lead of France, Denmark, Belgium and others and ban the burqa?
Yeah. Prime Minister.
Can I welcome her to her place? But I'm not going to follow her down that line. But now she is here and safely in her place, perhaps she could tell her new party leader that his latest plan to bet £80 billion of unfunded tax cuts, there's no idea how he's going to pay for it, is Liz Truss all over again. Although, considering I think she was a Conservative member when Liz Truss was leader, she probably won't.
Well, I mean, interestingly, sorry to interrupt you there, Paul Richards, we actually got an answer from the PM. No, doesn't want to ban the burqa. That came a little bit left field. The reaction in the Commons was quite sort of shocked. But again, I mean, I would ban the burqa. Many other countries in the West have done. Interestingly, it's actually been banned. It's actually banned in some Muslim countries, which is absolutely fascinating. But Paul Richards, I mean, just coming back to the answer you were giving in terms of the support that Keir Starmer has right now, it is just dissipating by the hour, isn't it?
Well, there are some polls this week that says he's the most popular choice for Prime Minister. So, I mean, there is a residual support there for him and for the Labour government. But I'm not saying it's not rocky. And if you knock on doors, there's a by-election in the Scottish Parliament, which is coming up imminently, where, real opinion will be tested, and that won't be good for the government, I don't think. So, yeah, it's rocky. But I think... as the announcements start to roll out, the trade deals, the interest rates have come down, we're going to see more investment in defence, transport, and the health service, of course. These things do start to change opinion around, because no vote in the next election is decided by the last election. There's no loyalty anymore to anything.
No, absolutely. Things have changed there. Fascinating. Paul Richards, thank you. Final word to you, Claire?
I think Paul is very, very sensible when it comes to these things.
There you go, Paul. You've got a compliment.
That's the one compliment I'll give. But the rest of it, I think the Prime Minister needs to start answering some questions about where this money is coming from that he is able to spend.
Well, a lot of people are expecting we will be seeing more tax cuts, but of course they said they wouldn't raise certain taxes like income tax, national insurance, which then became national insurance for employees, not employer. That went up. Massive big hike, massive big impact on jobs, and also VAT. But doesn't leave very much to hike up. Can't borrow anymore.
Exactly.
Or we're going to have spending cuts in other areas. Absolutely. Again, we're going to be spending a heck of a lot more on defence than they were claiming earlier this week. I'm telling you that for absolute fact right now. It's going to be fascinating. Your thoughts on PMQs, very welcome. Your thoughts also on the actual report predicting that on current trajectories, white British people will become a minority in the UK population within the next 40 years. What is your reaction to that? Good thing, bad thing, something to be worried about, something to celebrate? I'd love to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
The most disturbing element of this, I think, is the fact that this man was attacked by a knife-wielding maniac who stabbed him, and then as he was on the floor, he was kicked by a passing delivery driver.
Yeah.
Those two individuals have not yet faced trial. I know they will do. But as yet, this one's been very much rushed through. Apparently the words are the more frightening thing. But even worse than that, the judge in this case said, we know that your protest was disorderly and likely to stir disordered behaviour because you were attacked twice.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Is Talk 12:29 is the time. Unlike everyone else, we're not taking the full PMQs. We just took the interesting bit. Let's get to your calls. Love to hear what you have to say. 0344 499 1000 on this report suggesting that on current trajectories, the UK population will become, a minority white British in the next 40 years. Andrew's on the line. He's in Hertfordshire and wants to have his say. Good afternoon to you, Andrew. How are you?
Really good. How are you?
Good, very
good.
good.
Tube journey in today, I hope. In relation to this report, it's nothing. Let's look at British is the most important thing.
Andrew, Andrew, I'm going to stop you. This is a terrible line. Can I go to another call and we will get you back on straight after, I promise you. Paddy is on the line, hopefully a better line in Sussex. Paddy, what do you want to say?
Hi, Julia. Can you hear me clearly?
Yeah, that's lovely. Thanks, my love. What do you want to say?
Yes, I agree with most of what you said this morning.
What did I say?
It'd be a bad thing because white British are probably the best race of people in the world. We did so much.
I don't like race. Again, I think our culture. I don't think it's our race. I think it's our culture. I think it's Protestant Northern European culture, and it's our history of our relationship with the state and with people who believe in God, with God. I don't think it's got anything to do with the colour of our skin.
Oh, yes, but Julia, the colour of our skin really it doesn't reflect what race we are. Race and colour of your skin are different. Yeah, they're completely different, really. So we've done so much. We brought so much medicine, engineering, science, culture.
Industrial Revolution.
Yes, absolutely. Everything you see when you step outside is due to, the British and Europeans. So why import people from really backward parts of the world? Some places never built a two-storey building until they were colonised.
Look, I have to say, I'm never entirely convinced why we want to import people from, incredibly, very, very, very backwards places in terms of their views, what we value in this country, in terms of education, in terms of, general culture and living. I don't understand why we think that's a benefit to us and why we owe a duty of care. I think those people should stay and build their own countries and make their countries great. But, importing people, let's say everybody who comes here, the immigrants and their families come from countries where high educational levels, culturally affiliated to this country, in terms of sharing similar values and outlooks. Would that be an issue, even if it meant that white British were a minority?
Potentially it wouldn't be an issue because there would be a melting pot. Mm-hmm. And, for example, really intelligent Chinese, Japanese, Koreans, Swedes, etc., not really a problem. But when you get them from some mountain area and some back of beyond hellhole, and they bring their religion, that's got the problem with, the one where they still believe the sun sets every morning in a muddy pool. They have to believe that because it's part of their book.
OK, I don't know. I've got no references there. But OK, but again, I don't think it's even down to, intelligence. I think it's a way of thinking. And I think a lot of that comes from, again, if you look at, Protestant, Judeo-Christian culture, I think that's been a really, really, really key part of the success of Northern Europe and whether we've been able to, expand and develop. But, yeah, very, very interesting point. Paddy, thank you for that. Let's go back to Andrew in Hertfordshire, hopefully on a better line. Andrew, what do you want to say then?
Oh, Julia, this is a nothing statement. It doesn't matter. Look at Baroness Amos. Look at look at Daley Thompson, look at Kelly Holmes. It doesn't matter. All that matters is the values.
You're saying race, the colour doesn't matter?
Nothing. That's just a dumb headline. We got wonderful people. The thing that's important is values. That's the key thing. So if British values die, fair play, freedom of speech, giving everybody the opportunity to let you down, and they frequently do, that's what's important, Julia. The thing that's so sad here is it goes towards colour. It doesn't matter. My hero, Daley Thompson, I wasted 5 years of my life in the gym trying to get biceps he was born with. You know, come on.
That's it. No, I'm with you. For me, it's values, it's culture, it's attitudes. Yeah, so much of that. Andrew, thank you so much. Glad we got you back on the line. It's coming up to 12:34. Up next, delighted to say, joining us in the studio will be the Ukrainian MP, Kira Rudik, talking about what the audacious attacks the Ukrainians have managed to hit on Russian forces in Russia and indeed on the Crimean, the bridge to Crimea as well. But I wonder what she makes of that exchange at PMQs about the Ukrainian fighting a proxy war against Russia. That was brought up by the Prime Minister. We'll talk about that in just a moment with her. This is Talk, Home of Common Sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. 12:36 is the time. Claire Pistol's still with me. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, and I'm so delighted to welcome big friend of the show, Ukrainian MP Kira Rudik, to the studio. I know you've been in the studio with Mike, but you and I, we've been speaking since very early on after the Russian invasion of the main part of Ukraine, and we've spoken to you, the day that you got your own home bombed, sitting there with the glass in your sitting room, and living the reality of it, and being a fine speaker for your country and your countrymen and women. And we so appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you, Julia, for having me here in the studio. I'm so happy to be here today.
We're very excited to have you. Look, there's so much to talk about. First up, I want to talk about sort of defence and NATO and Donald Trump, but just in terms of the news we've had in the last few days, two incredibly audacious attacks by the Ukrainian forces on Russia. Particularly, I thought, fascinating after Donald Trump said so famously to your leader, President Zelensky, back in the White House a few months ago, saying, you don't hold the cards, you don't have any cards. And your leader saying, I'm not playing cards, you're playing cards. Turns out you did have some cards when it came to that extraordinary drone attack on Russian jets, which took out what we think roughly a third of these bombers.
Yeah, it did. I think there is no other comment just than wow. for what happened. On a human level, can you imagine how hard it was for President Zelensky not to say anything when
18
he knew?
months in the planning?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was such a sophisticated and technological operation that turned to be so efficient. And I think it will go down in history of special operations, in conducting wars. And
it's up there with the pager attack on Hezbollah by Israel, isn't it?
Yeah,
I mean, it's up there in terms of taking out key bits of equipment. There's been a dispute whether it was worth, $2 billion worth of jets or $7 billion. Either way, a heck of a lot of jets that were being used to bomb your country and to bomb civilians.
Not only to bomb, but also to threaten. Is like every time when the missile carrier is up in the air raid siren is throughout Ukraine.
Life stops.
And everyone stops. Kids go to the bomb shelters. People stop working. Banks stop working. Everybody goes to and we sit and we're waiting. Would they try to attack us or not? And right now, that will be at least 1/3 of that left.
That's done. And again, what's so clever is basically having all these drones packed into crates, taken. Russians weren't aware, being paid to take these lorries near to these sites where these jets were. Some was it almost 4,000 miles away from the Ukrainian border,
Almost
and then being able to be opened remotely. The drones come out and attack. I mean, it is extraordinary, and certainly something we should be looking at here.
Yeah, well, I think there will be a movie about it, 100%. But it's also a way that we are showing, not only to President Trump, but to everyone else, this is how you deal with Russia. Not with the talks, not with the appeasement, but actually you hit where it hurts. You go according to the rules of war, because you hit the military target. Yes, no civilians hurt, right? And so you just do what you have to do, and you get the result.
And we've also had that attack on the Kerch Bridge as well, and a bomb planted by Ukrainian spies, basically took out, again, there's a third attack on the structure. And again, this is very, very, very important in terms of the ability of the Russians to bring supplies to Crimea. It was interesting that after this attack, and of course after that drone attack on the bombers, that there were more peace talks. And use that in inverted commas, really, peace talks between Ukrainians and Russians. This time they lasted just an hour, not looking like they're making much headway.
Well, let's just look where did it all start, right? Why these talks started. Because President Trump said that he believes that Putin respects him and that he will end the war. It's very simple. If Putin wanted to end the war, he would have done it. It's just very simple. You stop attacking Ukraine and the war is over.
Ta-da!
Ta-da! Well, but President Trump saw that it had something to do with the respect by Putin, and so that's why these talks began. So there is one particular good thing about it, that we got to exchange prisoners and we got some of our people home. This is super important for us.
There have been regular prisoner exchanges.
Yes, absolutely. But do we think that these talks can bring peace? Well, I'm very skeptical, because again, the question of peace goes up with the question, how do you make sure that Putin will keep his part of the bargain? And as of right now, there has not been any significant proofs that somebody can do it except by the language of force. So we think that the good results at the battlefields will give us more leverage on the diplomatic way, but not vice versa.
And certainly President Zelensky, in that infamous White House meeting with Vladimir Putin, was making the point, but we've agreed to deals before with Vladimir Putin since 2014, and he never keeps his word.
Absolutely.
So much of this now, in terms of what is going on right now, is down to what Donald Trump thinks on that given day, and his golf buddy, Steve Witkoff, who is his envoy on virtually every war ongoing in the world. The trouble with this is that Donald Trump seems to, for some reason, think it's a he said, she said when it comes to Russia and Ukraine, and that somehow Vladimir Putin is in some way a victim. And I mean, it's been somehow forced. His language around Vladimir Putin and around Ukraine has been, I think, extraordinary and extraordinarily ill-informed. It's very obvious to me that many people working in the White House, and indeed certainly in the Department of State, his Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, and very much have changed their tune publicly. What they're saying behind the scenes, I think, very different. Do you think that there's going to come a point, though, and sooner rather than later, when Donald Trump and his closest allies, and perhaps the people who he's believing on social media, which seems to me to be a very big issue, he spouts a lot of things that I've only seen on social media, like 1 million people dead. It's nowhere near 1 million people dead. He's only got that from certain right-wing bot accounts, on the social media. that there'll come a point when he'll realise that he is being made to look like, and it's a technical term, this, a schmuck. He is being made to look a fool by the fact that Vladimir Putin has got his little finger and he's winding Donald Trump round it, and he's looking weak and he's making America look weak. And it's at that point when he will actually go back to helping Ukraine to actually win the war.
We hope that this process has started and that it is happening, and that people who want President Trump, who want good for him, right, will come to him and like start telling him, look, we are all looking very bad, we're looking weak. And not only to American people, not only to Europe, but to all of those bad guys out there, to all the leaders of authoritarian regimes who look at him and they're just laughing, because basically there was not a single thing that President Trump has gotten from Putin. He was sending his envoys, he was trying to bring him in.
He kept waiting 8 hours, humiliatingly.
Yeah, so it seems like America, the strongest country, the strongest nation right now, seems to be very weak for some reason, and humiliated, honestly, especially that when President Trump was calling for a ceasefire, Putin even didn't reply to that. They said something, and right now it seems that Putin got everything that he wanted, and President Trump seems like a person that cannot deliver even small results.
He said he would do it day one.
Well, he said 24 hours, and he said in day one, and he said maybe in 100 days, and right now it seems much more complicated. You know, there are no simple solutions to complicated problems.
No, and at the end of the day, the Ukrainian people are still behind your President Zelensky. You're not even in the same party as Zelensky, and you're
I am in opposition.
Full square behind him in terms of these issues. The ability of the American president to tell the Ukrainian people, yeah, you're going to give up a whole load of your territory for good, 20%, the Donbass region, Crimea for good, but we're not going to offer any guarantee to you. And in fact, Russia are requiring that there isn't a guarantee from NATO or from any troops, peacekeeping troops, Britain, France, other coalitions willing. We've not seen many willing, but even if it was just our troops, that would not be acceptable to him. Why would Ukrainian people accept that after all they have gone through in the last 3 years?
Well, we won't. It's very simple.
He can't stop you fighting.
Absolutely. I don't think there is anyone who actually can stop us from fighting, including President Zelensky. And I think he understands it very well, that we are all united behind him for the reason right now that we all need to survive and to do it together. And right now, situation may be better, may be worse, but Julia, remember in 2022, when Putin launched full-scale invasion, nobody believed that we will stand for more than a couple of days. Yeah. We have chosen not to capitulate. So why would we do this now? The situation is not worse for us. We have more allies who get to understanding that Putin is a threat to everyone. We work on our own weapons. We conduct such amazing operations. Yes, people are exhausted. The war is terrible and the war is very hard. But we know what would happen to us if Putin conquers all of that, all of our country, and we are not going to let him do it.
And again, that's very much my view, and I've always made it very clear to my audience and to you and others that, again, this phrase that came up at PMQs, this proxy war for UK, for Europe, it's your countrymen and women who are losing their lives to keep Europe safe from Vladimir Putin. There's no doubt at all Western military experts are very worried about the threat from Putin, Xi Jinping, Iran, Islamist terrorism and the like. We've seen an announcement this week of a massive increase in our defence budget in this country from 2.3% to 2.5%. Doesn't sound massive, but we're talking billions. And an ambition, a target, different words are used, about 3%. Yesterday it emerged that the NATO chief, Mark Rutte, is actually going to be calling for a 5% budget, really 3.5% on paper, but actually an extra 1.5% in terms of cybersecurity, border control and the like. There are many countries in Eastern Europe on Russian borders who are already spending that sort of amount. Do you think that where we are, certainly in Britain, in terms of what you know, and I know you follow it closely, where we are in terms of our spending, French spending, German spending, the big economies of Europe, do you think we are anywhere close to where we need to be able to take on Vladimir Putin?
Let me ask you differently. If the war is over today, do you think in this situation Russia, China, North Korea and Iran will stop working together and stop producing weapons and supplies? I don't think so. This is why Europe, this is why the United States, democratic countries need to be ready. And unfortunately, we live in the world where we have to stand up to bad guys who wouldn't just give up on the idea to take over democratic countries. They will do it differently, including cybersecurity, including informational attacks, including conventional warfare. This is why we all need to be ready. And we obviously salute to all the decisions that are made to increase the spending for defense, because it is good for Ukraine, it will support us in our fight, but it is also good for Europe because it will allow more independence from the United States and their umbrella, and it will provide a clear understanding of how Europe will be able to sustain threats from all the other countries.
Thank you, Kira Ruddick. Appreciate that. Still with us in the studio is Claire Pearsall, who's a former Conservative government advisor. What do you say to that?
I think you're right. It's the EU spending, so Europe as a whole spending on defence has been so much less than it needed to have been for many, many years. And the war now in Ukraine has highlighted the fact we need to be able to help our allies, protect our own borders, but looking at the wider threat of what happens when Putin decides to go and take part of another country. Could be a NATO country, then we're in bigger trouble than we are.
Absolutely. Claire Pearsall, thank you. And you'll stay with me for a few more moments. Kira Ruddick, Ukrainian MP, friend of the show. So great to have you in the studio. Keep safe is all I can say. 12:49 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. They're going to be talking about, the latest net zero madness. But it might be less madness rather than more. That's a good news story. This is Talk.
The most disturbing element of this, I think, is the fact that this man was attacked by a knife-wielding maniac who stabbed him, and then as he was on the floor, he was kicked by a passing delivery driver.
Yeah.
Those two individuals have not yet faced trial. I know they will do. But as yet, this one's been very much rushed through. Apparently the words are the more frightening thing. But even worse than that, the judge in this case said, we know that your protest was disorderly and likely to stir disordered behaviour because you were attacked twice.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. Welcome back to the show. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Claire Pearsall still here, joined right now by Ben Pyle, who's a writer and co-founder of Climate Debate UK. A very, very good afternoon to you, Ben.
Good afternoon, Julia.
Thank you so much for joining us. Now, you and I, we've talked a number of times, and I know I was following you on social media, being a fantastic campaigner on just trying to get some sanity into debate on net zero, i.e. we shouldn't be following net zero. But normally we'd be debating or talking about some madness that is being pushed by Ed Miliband, the net zero secretary. But very, very, very good news. This is in the Telegraph today. Industry sources have told us that Ed Miliband is poised to ditch targets for heat pumps amid budget cuts that threaten his ambitions. The government had declared that from 2028, this is the previous government, 600,000 heat pumps would be installed every year in British homes as part of the net zero drive. It is, of course, a fraction of that because no one wants them and they cost a fortune. But they've still got that, technically, they've got that target. He's going to drop it. How confident are you that that will actually be dropped, and why should it be dropped?
Well, it does sound like good news, but I'd say we need to be cautious about this. I'm sorry. It's good. It's good news. I mean, this was a Boris Johnson initiative. He said it within weeks of coming to, taking the top job at the Tory party. Yep. He said we're going to ban boilers, and everyone who thought that Boris was sort of going to take us away from the ridiculous rules that Europe seemed to impose on us, we're really disappointed, and he went fully into the green stuff.
Yeah, Carrie Johnson has a lot to answer for on that front.
Well, I mean, the buck stopped with him.
Yeah, really. Of course.
But then Rishi Sunak's government, I think, finally started to realise that this was going to be a really, really chaotic and catastrophic move. Because we've had lots and lots of policies over the years that have tried to give people free money to help them help kickstart the sort of energy efficiency in homes and reduce people's CO2 emissions. And then the emphasis switched, and they said, right now, retailers and manufacturers, you've got to sell a certain proportion of heat pumps rather than gas pumps, or we're going to face a fine. And consumers turned their noses up at that too. So all these policy failures have stacked up. And this has been the most catastrophic one, because it turns out it's actually really, really, really expensive to retrofit a home.
Well, exactly. But also, crucially, there's actually a rule, all new homes have to have heat pumps. But again, they're totally unsuitable for an awful lot of the homes that are built in this country. Ones that have been built from the 1950s onwards, or homes now, and they are very, very expensive. And here's a small point worth making as a girl who has a hot water bottle in June. I feel the cold. I'm a southern softie, what can I say? Is that they don't work very well.
They don't work very well, and they need a lot of insulation, a lot of other upgrading. You can't just put a heat pump into where the central heating boiler used to be. And now central heating boilers are fantastic technology.
Oh my God, they're the greatest
thing. They can fit in a kitchen cupboard, just a foot and a bit wide and a couple of feet tall, and you barely even notice it. It's a wonderful invention.
And they're quiet, which heat pumps aren't as well.
That's right. And when a few years ago, I think it was Kirklees Council, they tried an experiment. They retrofitted about 3 or 4 local authority owned homes, very modest local council houses, 2 up, 2 down type things, and they discovered that they'd have to spend £60,000 to upgrade to upgrade these homes, just to achieve like a £300,000 or £400 saving off their energy bill, and that was before we had these huge spikes.
Quite apart from the fact, again, most people, if it's councils don't have the money they can barely provide the basic, legal services supposed to require, provide like social care and things like that, and care for children with special needs. Let alone do that, there isn't the spare money. And most homeowners, whether you're a landlord, and I know there's lots of rules regarding this with landlords in terms of their properties, or whether you're a homeowner, I remember, we had to put a new boiler in. I remember saying to my husband, I just feel so lucky to be in a privileged situation where a new boiler isn't catastrophic for our finances, whereas for millions of families, it really, it really, really is. But a heat pump is way more, quite apart from, as you say, you just put a boiler in the same cupboard in the kitchen or the bathroom, whereas a heat pump, you're going to have to be digging stuff up, redecorating, doing stuff in the garden. But as we said, and you and I have said this for years, whether it's about cars and whether you have to buy electric cars or not, whether it's heat pumps, solar panels, all these policies, none of these policies and targets survive any contact with reality.
That's right, because these problems, these costs fall on ordinary people, and ordinary people can do the do the basic arithmetic that's required to work out that it's not worth spending £60,000 on upgrading your home to save £400. That's an absurd waste of money.
Ta-da! It's like we can do maths.
Right. But unfortunately, it doesn't seem like any of the powers that be, any of the people that occupy the Quangos, Ofgem, who's supposed to look after interests, the Climate Change Committee, they seem particularly averse to this kind of basic
Ben, you know as well as I do, it is a religious cult. It is not based on maths or science. We'll have to leave it there. Time's against us, up against the clock. Ben Powell, writer, co-founder, Climate Debate UK. Great to have you on the show. Do follow his Substack and also on social media as well. Just final word to Claire Pearsall on this. Your face is a picture, by the way. Just a total, this is all madness face.
But it is all madness.
Your lot, just as bad as this lot.
Yeah, and I disagreed with it when my lot did it, but I don't want windmills, I don't want solar farms everywhere, and I don't want a heat pump. I like to be warm, and I like it to be efficient.
It's really, really straightforward. I will buy a gun. I will not allow anyone to enter my home and enforce me to have a heat pump. I want my central heating and I want it on high all year round. My husband sees the bills and he goes, what? But anyway, Ian Collins is here. What do you want to say, my
There were
lovely?
3 plumbers and a heat pump.
At least he's not talking about kumquats.
Here's the... no.
That's all I can say.
But listen, I can talk about your humble pump. And there is a